Go. All right, at this time, 5:09, I'd like to call the special meeting of the Belton Independent School Board of Trustees to order. A quorum of board members is present. This meeting has been duly called, and notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. First item on the agenda is public comments. We have some that signed up, so let's go on into this. In accordance with District Policy BED Local, any person wishing to address the school board during public comments must submit public comments form. Public comments during a special meeting, such as this, shall be limited to the items on the agenda posted with the notice of the meeting in accordance with BED Local. In order to comply with Texas Open Meetings Act, the board may not respond to comments or otherwise discuss or act upon any issues that are not posted on the meeting agenda. Each participant shall be limited to 5 minutes. Janet Lee will keep time during the participants' remarks and will provide notice when 1 minute of time is remaining.
You have a different secretary, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, I know, but you never kept time. You can keep time. Oh, I'm sorry, I just asked you earlier if you wanted to do it. Okay, Manuel will keep time then. Just let them know when there's 1 minute left. So that will be Manuel. He'll take care of that. Okay, first one is Janet Brown. Y'all can stand. We've got the camera to where y'all can stand where you're at. State your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, hello, good evening. My name is Janet Brown, and my residence is actually Morgan's Point. This is my neighborhood, so welcome. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about the training that you are about to receive. The training you're about to receive is flawed because it discourages board independence, oversight, and encourages groupthink under the guise of teamwork. This is best explained in the testimony before the Texas Senate Committee on Education on August 16, 2016. The link to the video will be provided in a handout, and we highly recommend viewing it for yourself. And I will now read from the transcript. Moderator, please state your name and who you represent. My name is Meg Baggage, and I live in Highland Park ISD, Dallas, and I have 5 children, 2 who have graduated Highland ISD and 2 who continue to go to high school there, and our youngest. We moved away from the school system when we noticed the shift in curriculum away from academics with the alignment with TASA's vision. In 2008, TASA released its document creating a new vision for public education for Texas. A key item in the 2008 TASA vision reads, "Attention of leaders is focused on the dominant social systems that govern behavior, beginning with those that clarify beliefs and direction." It is clear in the documents that academics are being pushed aside to favor certain social systems reflecting TASA's vision. HISD former superintendent Dr. Orr served as a member of the Visioning Institute at TASA. He also played a leadership role at the creation of High Performance Consortium, serving as co-chair. Highland Park ISD adopted the TASA vision in 2010 and rewrote the profiles of our students and teachers and changed them to learner for the future and educator for the future. These profiles align with UNESCO and the promotion of global citizenship and a global economy rather than American citizenship and a global economy. School boards are the highest number of elected officials in the country. They have their own policies and regulations and fulfill an important role in their communities. TASA and TASB are taxpayer-funded lobbying groups that often oppose the policies of Texas-designated oversight organizations, TEA, SBOE, as well as opposing laws by the Texas legislature. When school boards get their direction from policies from lobbying groups, TASA and TASB, who are then Who then is representing we the people? I'm here today asking you to investigate TASA and TASB and their influence on our local schools, which is undermining our ability to have local control and to defund their lobbying group of our tax dollars. Thank you for allowing me to come and share this testimony with you today and this view.
Next, Brenda Howard.
Okay.
Please state name and address for the record.
Belton, Texas. Brenda Howard, Belton, Texas. I will continue to read from this transcript, the testimony. Moderator, thank you. Are there any questions? He says, Laura Olson's not here. Lynn Davenport. My name is Lynn Davenport, and I appreciate those of you who are still here to listen to our testimony. I'm a parent from Dallas, and I have 3 children in Richardson ISD schools. I'm one of the few parents who attends board meetings, so I also attended the community meeting held by Chairperson Donna Borich regarding the next generation accountability assessments. It is my observation that our locally elected school boards are being influenced by taxpayer lobbying groups like TASA and TASB. This undermines our ability to have local control. So, when, Senator, you mentioned about the TASB indoctrination, I witnessed it myself in my district. So we hold elections and we use our tax dollars to send our school board trustees to be trained on how not to listen to us. So they attend team of 8 training sessions to learn to handle mavericks, mutineers, and malcontents like myself. They use the Delphi technique to engage the community with preordained outcomes established well before the meeting began. So our district has been on the decline ever since we aligned with the TASA vision and the High Performance Consortium. Instead of listening to the taxpayers and those they were elected to represent, they attend TASA and TASB conferences sponsored by companies who profit off of our children and our tax dollars. Pearson, Google, ETS, Houghton Mifflin, College Board, and Ambience. I'm sure some of them are in this room, in the audience right now. So when they come home from the conferences, they use words that don't resonate with me as taxpayer. Global system, citizen, TASA vision, future ready, global economy, 21st century learner, human capital, global future, social emotional learning rubrics, and global workforce. The words we use in my house are reading, writing, paper, pencil, textbooks, math facts, homework, solving for the correct answer. And she says, Randy, you can attest to that. Grammar, good grades, spelling, progress reports, report cards, and academics. So I realize you're tasked with the impossible, but you already have the answers in the school board policies and the law. They're there to protect and serve the kids. But because they are not doing this, we look to lobbyists and consultants, profiteers, and private-public partnerships to save us. Thank you for listening.
Monica Wyndham. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Monica Wyndham. I live in Temple, Texas. My children go to our zone for Zone 1. I will also continue to read from the transcript. So I am asking, who is in charge here? The government, Commissioner Merritt, John King, our other local leaders and world leaders, some of those who send their own children to private schools, TASA, the school boards, who is in charge? My answer is, we the people. That is it. The remainder of the video is a discussion with the Senate Education Chair, and they discuss their problems with TASA and TASB taking over curriculum and school boards. They question the word independent in the school board's name. They discuss that local control has been lost. The boards have simply become pawns of our superintendents. This discussion talks about the difficulty of being a board member, and that board members have also expressed their helplessness in the regard, board members are good people who are trying to do the right thing, but their hands are tied to someone else's vision. Faith is more powerful than government, and nothing is more powerful than God. I also want y'all to know that just because I may disagree with you, that does not mean I hate or dislike you. We need to relearn that in our society and our community for ourselves and our children. One of the most cowardly things ordinary people do is to shut their eyes to the facts. I'm asking you, do not shut your eyes to the facts. Do not use our children's minds and vulnerability for any personal, financial, or political gain. Money funded to Belton ISD will not stop us from fighting back to protect our children and our community, and this experimental situation you are doing to our children needs to end now. They are children. You do not and will not ever have the right to use them in this experimental garbage for any personal gain. I'd also like to take a moment to ask you about this school year's 2021-22 middle school and high school supply list. The current list have only been updated for elementary schools. Yet the list available online for middle and high school children still shows out-of-date supply lists that indicate masks are still a requirement. When will that update be listed so that we can provide the supplies that we need for our children going into middle and high school? Do you plan to have mask mandates still listed? The government's orders prohibited you from requiring masks, and as studies show, they not only cause more harm than good to our children, but they are proven to be ineffective. Thank you all for listening and taking the time to listen to all of us.
Sean Clutter. Take your name and address for the record.
Sean Clutter, Belton, Texas. So in conclusion, we ask that you focus, okay, on your own vision, your own personal vision for Belton Independent School District. It has to be focused on academics. Has to be, most important. Even though you're here for the TASB training, you are in fact the leaders of our school district. The leaders. We need you to be strong leaders for our children. So important. So just remember this as you focus on your training and your interactions with one another. It's so important. You control and you represent your constituents. And most importantly, above all, you represent the students of Belton Independent School District. And I just ask you to focus on that. It's about the students. And collectively together, you can accomplish that mission. So I thank you for listening to us tonight. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right. That does conclude them all. Yes.
Dinner and stuff.
Yep. I'll adjourn the meeting so everybody can get their dinner. All right. I am calling this meeting back to order. Are you gonna leave? No? Okay. All right. Team of 8 training. Okay, just to start this out, this does count our time. I know y'all are going to be excited about this, what I talked to Matt about. Do y'all remember the framework of school board? That you have to do that? Okay, so I talked to Matt and said we didn't want to do it. And he said that was good. I did that. Actually, that's actually a complete lie. What happened was I asked Matt, I said, hey, so we always have this big parchment thing, and he goes, the framework of the Texas School Board? And I was like, yeah. I said, so, and then we go down it, we do this. I said, and I guess that's mandatory. And the look in his eyes was like, I don't know why you're asking me. We've never done that. So we're not doing that because it's not mandatory. So we don't have to do that this year. Erin doesn't care because she never got to do it.
Okay, well, I printed it out and took notes and everything. Okay. She's not a terrible.
All right.
She worked hard on this.
Well, this is a high achieving board, and that's homework. Yes, absolutely.
She gets a gold star.
All right. So
I'm excited to welcome Dr. Phil Gore and Mr. Orrin Moore to us, and is our partners from TASB for this training tonight. And just a reminder, team of 8 training is required for board members annually to meet with the superintendent and to talk about various things, and we're going to turn it over to them to help guide us through some things, including our reflection that y'all filled out a while ago. So thank y'all for being here tonight.
We can thank Ross Perot for this.
That's right.
And a commission he led back in the 80s that ended up resulting in districts being required to adopt a vision statement and have an annual team building board superintendent. The reality is, board superintendent relationships, they really are make or break. And so how the board gets along with each other, how the board gets along with the superintendent, how you appropriately challenge one another, hold each other accountable, that's a really big deal. It has a big impact on the district. So we're glad to be here. We'll introduce ourselves and give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves to us too.
My name is Orrin Moore, board consultant at TASB in my 6th year. Former central office worker in my hometown, Smithville ISD. Before that, worked in education in Harris County area, serving after-school programs, and I really enjoyed my work there. The name of the game tonight is going to be focus. And as we talk more about the work we have ahead of us and get to know you better, I look forward to talking about what focus means to you and how it applies to the work that you're doing and how you're serving your students. I would like to Gore say a bit about himself, and then that leads to our first part of our discussion tonight.
So I'm a former trustee, a suburb in the Seattle area, and I was a pastor while I served on a school board. I was a pastor for 20 years, and I've been doing this school board development work since 2007. Had the privilege of coming to TASB in December of 2015. So my boss often told me for a couple of years the best thing I ever did was hire Orrin. He hasn't said that lately. But we're friends, so there'll be a little bit of that as we go along. About the time I was coming to TASB, I was finishing up a book, co-editing a book with Tom Alsbury on improving school board effectiveness. And what we tried to do was summarize the research that was available that shows a link between what school boards do and student achievement. And so I don't know if any of you are familiar with that book. Matt's probably read it cover to cover. But the Lighthouse study that's reported there in Chapter 1 is one that's become foundational for a lot of our work across Texas. And it really focuses in on how important it is to believe that students can learn. And if you believe they can learn, you can have that vision and you can govern and lead for them to reach that. So TASB launched the Exceptional Governance Project back in 2016. And it's really all just wrapped around this question of what is exceptional governance? What does the research suggest? What are some promising practices from the districts across Texas that seem to be working well? And not to get too far ahead of myself, but we've come to understand a few things in the last 5 or 6 years that in particular, when boards are engaged with and involving their community in decision making, there seems to be a greater likelihood that they're raising achievement for all students and closing gaps at the same time. So we've got some folks all across Texas, researchers that are looking at that exact linkage. What is it about community engagement, community leadership, community involvement that seems to be a link between what boards do and raising achievement for all while closing gaps? My boss says that's the rabbit that we're chasing. And, it's something we can talk a lot about, but it's rarely seen. I hate to steal this thing, but you do have to look at that framework to get credit for team building. It's State Board of Education rules. So Aaron's already checked it off, and the rest of y'all got it. The great news is, for those that have been on the board for a while, it was revised last year. So it's not identical to the parchment version, but God knows that was a mistake to ever print it on parchment, because a few people began to think it was somehow sacred, like the Declaration of Independence or something, you get a copy at a museum. It is not. It's just human beings sat down and wrote the framework, and they made some changes to it this year. We'll point those out later. But this workshop's all about you. And so the quicker I shut up and the longer I shut up, the better. I'm smiling. We want to get to know you all, and Orrin, start somewhere here.
Sure, in fact, like Phil said, it is about you. And so we do have our agenda tonight, and we know what's important as far as the work we want to accomplish. But we would be remiss if we didn't start with hearing from each of you. If you would go around the room and anywhere you choose, in between bites, let us know what it is that you hope to get out of tonight's workshop and our time together.
Okay, I'll start. I'll start. So I'm Suzanne McDonald, been on the board since 2013. Been to clearly numerous amounts of these types of trainings. What I always hope to get out of this is something that I want to leave better than I entered the room. Certainly, you all will provide us with some guidance. We certainly have the information to move forward as a team to make some decisions for the greater good of our students. But at a very basic level, I just simply want to see if there are things that you all can provide to us, being different presenters than we've ever had before, that I've ever heard before in this type of setting, to see what nuggets you all have to offer.
Am I next? I don't know how much biographical data you want from me, but, well, you know, my brother works for TISD in the mailroom, so I'm surprised you knew him.
Absolutely.
Everybody knows him.
I hope that's good.
Yeah, everybody knows Mario.
My wife and I both graduated from Belton High School. My wife is now a retired educator. I've been practicing law. This is my 29th year. 99% of that's here in Bell County. I've been on the board since September 2018. I have 3 children. I went to Belton schools, graduated from Belton High School. My last one just graduated. And what do I want to get out of this workshop? You know, a lot of things that we do, and I've had this conversation with Matt before. I asked him, I think sometime earlier this year, you know, what can we do? I see these boards around the state getting awards. I mean, what are they doing that we're not doing? How can we be better, you know, echoing what Suzanne said, how can we be better at what we do? The law governs us a lot. You know, we're talking about government governance, but the law kind of tells us what we're supposed to do, you know, about the training and all those kinds of things. I want to know more about where we can kind of spread our wings and not have to be too concerned about the law, not be concerned about the law at all, because our policies should reflect what the community wants. It's our own vision. It's the collective wisdom of all of these people in this board. So I'm interested more in what we can do as a board, independent of the law. You know, what folks in Austin tell us to do, there's nothing we can do about that. And if somebody wants to change that, they need to talk to their local representatives, they need to talk to their governor, they need to go the political route. Because we are tied down to a large extent as to what we can and can't do. So I want to know more about, in terms of governance, anybody can follow the law, right? So I want you guys to tell us what we can do outside of the law, where we can spread our wings a little bit and really get a local flavor involved. That's what I want out of it.
I love both of those.
So as you know, Matt came on board with us just moments before COVID shut down. And so we've done, I mean, other than a few meetings and a few side conversations, and Matt started this one-on-one meetings with each of us, that's been great so that we can try to get to know him. We don't have not had tons of opportunity to really just sit and collaborate and brainstorm and do all of those things with Matt as a team like we've wanted to. And then we didn't get chosen to go to TASB, where you really do get an opportunity to discuss what you've learned, what you talk, you know what's going on in the state, all of that kind of stuff. So that's really the main purpose for me tonight, is to just, dig deeper into who our leader is, and we've gotten a flavor for that for sure, based on all of his community initiatives that he started to make sure that the community has a voice in every single thing we do, and we're all 100% behind that, and we love that. Kind of goes along with what Megan was saying too, but it's only been since Matt's come on that I think some of us have really learned how to advocate for students in a way that we didn't know how to do before. And it's a very nuanced thing as a board because we aren't administrators, we are not paid administrators. So we have to do only what we can do. And we're a team, we don't work individually. So just, that's what this is all about, is growing as a team, growing with Matt, growing as individuals. And that's what I want to do tonight.
And as you get deeper, this gets harder and harder. Should have gone first. Chris Floor, been on the board for just over 3 years, so start term 2. I did not grow up in Texas. I'm one of those where, don't hold it against me, I got here, so that's good. But in my life outside of school board, I'm in that IT consulting space. And, what I hope to get out of this is really helping us understand as a group, like, how do we go from, I think, really good to great, right? As this team, right? And then how do we take that and then take that down to the students, right? How do we go from really good to amazing, right? And connect the dots more around where we can influence that more, right? I mean, I'm 3 years in, right? Man, 3 years is a long time. There's a lot of learning that happens in 3 years, but there's still a lot to learn, to effectively, take us where I think we want to go, right? And help to guide that and drive that vision. So just, I don't know. That's what I'm trying to do.
Well, I'm Erin. I was appointed in January because there was, Rosie had resigned. And then I ran and contested in May. So just started my 3 year in May. And I taught for 11 years prior to this. And I also have family of teachers on both sides. So I grew up playing school, hearing about school, then I wanted to be a teacher. In fact, I said I wasn't going to be a teacher, and then I became a teacher.
Of course.
But a pivotal moment was when I had my first kid. And being a mom in a classroom, I looked at kids just totally different. That this is somebody's daughter, this is somebody's son. And then we have 3 more, we have 4 kids. And they're all so different. And I've been staying home, and so I've just been wanting to find ways that I could still stay connected in the school. And when that happened in January, I just ever thought about getting on school board. And then when a couple of people had asked about, you might think about this, and thought about it, prayed a lot about it. And so I then began to think, there's 13,000 kids that belong to moms and dads, and that it's no longer just about my 4, but it's about everybody's, and how what I want for mine, I would want for them as well. And so I think for tonight, a couple of things Janet said, something that I was thinking about is, since I'm new, I haven't gotten to be around all of us very often, because we know the rules on how much we can engage with each other, and I think we do that pretty well, but man, I sure wish we could spend more time together. So I look forward to hearing more about each other and what their thoughts are on different things. And then the other thing is, and Chris even said it, there was a quote from the XG presentation a couple weeks ago, that good is the enemy of great. And I think Belton is doing a lot of good things, and there are some things that we are doing great at. And so I think in looking through our self-assessment, there are good things, there are things that we're doing great in, and I hope that we continue to do that. But some of those things that we could, work on becoming more great at those things. So.
Well, I've been on the board for 4.5 years, and we've had a lot of change. I'm an old Belton person. My family's been here for 7 generations. So I get picked on a lot by the community because I'm accessible and I'm everywhere all the time. And my door's always open, my phone's always answered. But I will say that about 16 months ago, when we brought on this new group, we didn't know what we were doing. We get a call on a Sunday morning, I'm out. 10 days before school starts. Okay, now what? We were blessed in the process. We hired a great firm, thanks to Jeff, and those guys walked us through a process, and so we got to put our stamp on the vision moving forward. I think anytime you get elected into an existing situation, you're treading water. And I think we picked the right person because Belton isn't Belton anymore. It isn't the Belton that Janet and I graduated from. We got a lot of new people here, and they don't think the same way that old Belton people think. So what we have to try to do is figure out what the new vision of Belton's going to be. Because times are changing. The global economy is changing. The national economy is changing. Jobs don't even exist right now that kindergartners are going to have someday. We don't even know if they are yet. So we're in a weird transition stage, but I feel like over the last 16 months, our community's been engaged like never before, and it's meaningful engagement. The vision, the journey of a graduate, I sat on those meetings for hours and hours at nights. This is the community. This is our Tiger community now. This is the vision. I think there's districts out there who play like they want to listen, but they don't. That's not Belton ISD. I wouldn't be on this board if that's how it was. Because I'm not fake, I'm not phony, and I don't do things that way. So I have appreciated the willingness of our new administrators and our new team to come in and actually listen. I'm married to a Belton ISD teacher. She's been here for 20 years. I know what the old surveys used to be like and how insulting they were. Now, these thought exchanges that they do, they've listened. They've built their ideas into the vision and the ideas that we have now. So it's a community involvement now that I feel like we hadn't had in a long time. Belton's been a destination district in this area for generations, and we're not planning on it not being. And that's what I'm here for, because I love this district, and I love the people that are in this district. I love these kids. I think about it all the time. After 4 years, I've gotten consumed by this because I am concerned about what's going on in our classroom. Because I know, I'm married to a teacher. I know what's going on these campuses. And I'm friends with people on every campus because I taught here, I coached here years ago. And people come to me with their things that they may not be comfortable going to other places. And I'm a good filter for what happens. So I am extremely proud of the vision that we have adopted and our journey. I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of the work that our new administration has done. I'm proud of our board. I feel like we're a unique board in that we do get along, even when we don't. We've been through some really tough times over the last few years, but it's strengthened us and made us better as a group. What do I hope to get out of this tonight? I don't know. Because I believe that we're in a really good place right now. I trust what you guys are doing downtown. I know the little downtown, I don't think it's that way anymore, but I research and read and follow and go over this stuff all the time, and I feel like we are in a really good place to take Belton from what we've always been to what the new Belton's going to be with all our new friends and keep moving forward in this new age. That's what I'm all about.
Wow, well, we stole everything out of that one. Sorry. I'm Jeff Norwood. I've started my 6th year on the board. Pretty much everything that could be said has been said. You know, the only thing I'd go back into exactly that has changed, and that I think that the training will help with, is when Matt came in and started the journey of a graduate. You know, I can't speak for Belton forever. I've been here for 17 years though. But we had engaged the community in small bits and pieces to accomplish certain things, very limited things. It's the way it's always been. I had served on some of those. I've been involved. I mean, everything from hiring a principal, but they were limited things. And when Matt came up with the journey of a graduate, I didn't come up with, but sat us down and said, he wanted to do this, and given it was so difficult because it was all done on the computer. It was all done because it was the year of COVID. But truly brought in, I don't remember how many thousands of people got involved. And, you know, we saw the thoughts and what do they want and what do they want to see. And from that, so
probably different than we've ever done before, is the goals that sit here in front of us, the 5 that are here, they're actually not our goals. This is not Jeff's goals, or not Manuel's goals. They were what the community said, this is what we want. Just like when we hired Matt, we had never engaged the community. This community had never engaged the community. The board had never in hiring a superintendent. That was unheard of. If me, I know when we did it, I heard from people, I cannot believe you're doing this. But we wanted to know, what does the community want? And they gave us a blueprint. So it wouldn't have mattered if I didn't agree with it. This is what they said they wanted. Same thing with these goals. And I said, that's what I would like to get out of this, is taking the self-assessment, which, by the way, I thought was wonderful. Some of the questions are, I told Matt, some of them are hard to answer because always. Well, can't say always because 2 years ago we weren't doing these things, so I got to put sometimes now. But the 5 goals, how to reach those. And the truth is, if you look at the goals that we got from the community, that the community said that when a kid graduates and goes through Belton ISD, these are the things we want to see. When they walk out the door with that degree, here's the experiences, not just, hey, they were top 10, or no. These are the experiences we want. And the goals here, the wonderful thing about them is they're achievable, but they're never going to be finished. We used to have goals in our goal meetings, and we got to check them off. We were like, all right, we're going to do this, check. That one's done for this year, we don't have to worry about it again. But when we talk about these goals never stop. You're never going to achieve them completely. You're going to keep trying to get them. And that's what we need. That's what I'm looking forward to is, I think we've made some great steps. They say the first step was the hardest. Maybe it was, I don't know. Matt kind of led that. Now we've got these next steps that we have to take. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Try to get to weigh in. Awesome. I was wondering, normally they'd tell me I gotta be quiet. I have to wait all the way till the end on this one. A couple of things, I think, what drew me to Belton ISD was the feel of the community and the support for public schools. I'm a firm believer in public schools and the opportunity and the privilege that we have of educating every kid. And this community has done great work for years, and there's a lot to be proud of. And I believe we got great work done. What I'm looking for tonight is continued team building with a team of 8. I am blessed to be here, and I know it. I believe in my heart this is the best board in the state of Texas. And to Manuel's point on this, I believe that there are things that we can examine and say, how do we take that thing to the next level? And that's what I'm about. We threw out a big, hairy, audacious goal to our administrative team at the beginning of this last year, and they don't like it when I remind them that we're 1 year closer, but we said, best school district in the state of Texas in 3 years. That's what we want to do. Why? Not because we want a ranking or anything like that, because our kids deserve it, and we're fired up about it. And so the commitment of this board to say best board in the state of Texas in 3 years too, that's what I'm about, and best team of 8. Is a new superintendent. I don't think I can say new anymore. It's a relatively new superintendent. I've got a lot of learning and growing I got to do, and I have to continue to learn and rely on this team, and that's the thing that makes this team special to me, is it's not one person trying to do things, it's a team. So I'm excited to continue that journey tonight. That's okay. You want to throw anything else in?
Sorry.
You spilled my
He didn't go as long as I expected.
Yeah, I've gotten used to the cues. They give me cues when I gotta stop.
So before Phil takes the floor and goes over the assessment, I just want to again kind of just reiterate what I've heard. This idea that this team recognizes there's a difference between being good and being great. Phil referenced the Lighthouse research, some of the first research on what boards do that has an impact on student performance. I think it's worth mentioning that research looked at what were the things that these districts wanted to accomplish for their own local standards, the community desires, in addition to whatever state standards had been set. And what they found was that when board members did certain things, they noticed high levels of achievement, not just on state standards, but what was it that the community wanted. The assessment you took and you're going to review now is based on this idea of what is it that you want. Great. Identify that, focus, put it down on paper, go to the community. Now, here are some steps and practices that have been common associated with achieving that the board can do. So it's no longer as much of a mystery on what boards can do to achieve those community standards that they desire to see, or the state standards. So without further ado, I'm excited to jump into this. And then the last comment I'll make is, it is based on the framework. So your requirement for the state to get T-learning credit to assess yourself on your continuing education needs based on the framework, you've done that already. So we'll do a small discussion about it when the time comes, but you've done that 99% completion already, so.
I will say there's a lot of homework.
99%.
There's a lot of homework to be on school board. It's like being in
Especially
college
since Matt got here.
I'm so mad. The first week he was here, he gave us that book of governance.
Yes.
Oh,
Remember I told you? I told you.
First week.
holy moly.
Here's how I,
Yes. Are you one of the authors?
No.
Okay, 'cause we're gonna have to talk.
here's how I framed it. We, right now, are closed for COVID. If you're wondering what to do during the middle of this closure, here's a great book.
It was really good.
That's good. That is a good book, and love to hear some critique of it too. So yes, you've already sort of assessed yourselves on the Texas State Board of Education framework as you went through this. They're very connected. This is based right out of the research that shows a connection between what boards do and what student learning is happening across the district. It's also the only statistically validated board self-assessment of its kind, where an outside research firm did the statistical analysis to say, are these questions getting at what they're supposed to get at? So it's also heavily used in research across the country to say, this seems to be the trend. I'm very curious, though, if you can reflect back 2 or 3 weeks ago when you did this online, what were your feelings or thoughts about even the questions or the process? I've already heard that maybe it was kind of hard on some of them. Is it sometimes? Is it always? Janet?
Well, I mean, as I was going through, there were several I was thinking, I'm afraid to answer it a certain way because maybe I'm just not informed. Maybe it's just me that doesn't know. You know, it's not a matter of the truth of the situation or the reality. It's just that I'm just the one who doesn't. So there was just a few in there that I was unsure.
Don't know.
Yeah.
Did you mark?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I did.
good.
Yeah.
Perfectly valid response. And sometimes that's a place for a conversation, and sometimes it's just a wording difference where, oh yeah, that's right, we did that last month. Anyone else? Emmanuel?
You know, sometimes I've found myself answering the question with what my intent is.
Nice.
All right, so I look at the question and go, well, that's always my intent.
Right.
Now, what's the reality? And I really sometimes I didn't know what the reality was, so it was kind of, I don't know, but I know what my intent is.
Anyone else? A feeling that as you were taking this, or are some of these things brand new, Aaron, as far as what the board does that?
Yeah, so someone that don't know was probably for me.
Yeah, good.
I mean, because there were so many.
Yeah.
There were, 70-something questions. And I know we've done a lot, and I know that, and it's not like I didn't think we were gonna do them. I knew they were coming. I'm unaware, but I think the wording, like when some of them that said regularly, what does regularly mean? Do I put always most of the time, so that, especially on some that I did know we did, and so just that clarification of what does regularly mean, just again, some of the wording.
And the value's in the conversation. So the value, not only, you went through and you looked at these things, you did sort of a personal self-assessment of what you do as a board, but now as a conversation about these topics, there are some things that really lift out as solid green bars, right? We must be nailing it there or pretty close. And then there's some others where there's a good opportunity for a conversation. Well, do we do that or do we not do that? And frankly, there's one in here that's a little bit loaded because that's not the way we do it in Texas. So the correct answer would be probably never. But again, subject to interpretation on how you answer that. We're going to get to that too. Looking at the summary of your responses on there, what stands out to you is maybe, here's an area where we as a board seem to be doing really well. Or here's some areas where, let's drill down a little further.
Well, it looks like holding the school district accountable for meeting learning expectations is it scored the highest, and I feel like we do a good job in that area. Like I said, when you bring on a superintendent, I think the relationship between the board and the superintendent is different than whenever you are elected into a superintendent. So I think that the conversations have been much more poignant and meaningful because of the new relationship, because we brought in
Yes.
this team.
You're responsible.
We're responsible for this team. So I think that we're on point with that aspect, and I don't think any of us are scared to ask the hard questions.
Right.
I think when I first got on the board, I was overwhelmed a little bit. Well, maybe me and Janet weren't, and Chris, I know wasn't. But we were maybe scared to ask some of the harder questions because of how they were treated when we asked the hard questions. But I think now there's a lot more meaningful dialogue. So I think we're doing a really good job on this, because one thing I think that we reiterate over and over and over again, and it isn't just lip service with us, is we are student focused. When we have issues that come up, we try to do what is the ultimate best for all of our students. And I know you can't get all of them, but we're working towards doing that. Each and every, that's the new slogan. We really do focus on that. So I think we've had a lot better conversations in the last 16 months, and we're more comfortable asking the hard questions because of the new relationships that we have.
So number 4 is the one that's got the most green, for sure, right? And pretty close to the most green and blue combined, maybe kind of a second for number 2. The one that has the summary, we apologize.
We've got the 5 standards.
So the early research on this showed that it was standard 2 and standard 4 that correlated most with improving achievement.
2 and 4?
2 and 4. The idea of setting and communicating clear and high expectations for student learning, clear goals, plans for meeting those, it's all, and we're going to springboard into your draft strategic plan here as we go along. But then holding the system accountable. It's like, what can the board do? If we ask ourselves that question, what can the board do that makes a difference? You can hold the system accountable, right? I mean, that's kind of like square one. I'm feeling like there's so many different topics in my mind that I'd just love to jump into. You may have to keep me reined in. Up until about the late 90s, and even past that, 90s into the early 2000s, academics, policymakers, frankly, a lot of administrators believe school boards are just a part of the blob. They're just part of the education blob. They don't really make any difference. They're just sort of this administrative function, pass through, historic legacy that we do, and school boards don't make any difference. Then some studies came out in the 90s that showed school boards can actually harm student achievement. Well, that begs the question that Mary Della Gardell, the author of the Lighthouse Project, asked about 1998, if boards could do so much harm, couldn't they also do good? Then all of a sudden, there's this group of research, or this body of research that's emerged. Well, what would it look like for the board to do good? What would it look like for the board to actually add value? And that's where we find, setting and communicating clear and high expectations, very statistically significant with the likelihood the district's improving in student achievement, and holding the system accountable. Because ultimately, only the board can do those two things, both by law and by practice. Only the board can hold the superintendent accountable. I know he's got a contract. I hope it's a good one. I hope it's generous. Frankly, I don't have any idea. But he serves at the discretion of the board, right? So you could, once a year, thumbs up or thumbs down, and he's in or he's out. Or you can have a conversation, and, Dr. Smith, this is what we expect this year. How are we doing? Are we making progress? And it's that conversation, ultimately, that makes the difference in improving the system. It's just an ongoing conversation, not a once a year thumbs up or thumbs down, but how are we doing? Are we making progress? Anything else on that summary page stand out to you as, I'd like to think more or know more about that? We'll just look through these almost one question at a time.
I'm surprised at number 5.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, but here's the deal on 5, because I mentioned this one to Matt. I didn't know it's called number 5.
Yeah.
This was a trick question for those of us who've been on the board for a while, because
and it wasn't just one question, it was a series of questions, and it was about community engagement. And here's the deal. I had to be completely honest and say, okay, I've been on the board, 5 years. Okay, and questions about community engagement, and it was always, most of the time, some of the time, never, okay. I'm like, well, always, well, actually, for the last 18 months, certainly. For my previous 4 years, probably not so much. So I'm like, I can't be intellectually honest right here in circle 5 because it's not true. And so I told him that bothered me. I didn't know what our score was going to, actually I did, I'd seen it, but I was like, you're living in 2 different lives. We're talking about the life before we did it, or we're talking about going forward. Kind of where Erin's at, when she's come on, we've done the journey of graduate. She was never here for the just, hey, these are the goals, don't worry about it, let's move forward.
So she came into the move from good to great.
Yeah.
That's why she loved it.
But everybody else on this board had served in different capacities,
Yeah.
where I think the first time we ever really this board did a big community engagement was for the superintendent. That was the first time we'd ever really gone out.
Well, the mascot thing, we did that.
Oh, yeah, the mascot too, yeah, the mascot.
They did a big cluster for that.
Yeah, that's.
It was,
Those are fun.
That's bad. So, go ahead.
Well, I had the same internal struggle actually with number 4, right? Because, so holding the district accountable,
Yeah.
number 4. Yeah. So holding the district accountable for meeting student learning expectations, right? So it's like, okay, great, in my 3 years here, like, we get the annual paper report, we get that kind of stuff. But I never really felt like questions were welcome. And that's definitely changed.
In the past.
Yeah, that has changed in the last 16 months or however long it's been. And so I think we are moving in, absolutely in the right direction. I don't know, when I look at this, squint at it, I feel like, we maybe need longer proof of that, right? To sort of match the coloring, but I think we're making definite progress in that direction.
so I do have one comment, I don't mean to talk too much, but Suzanne and Jeff are in there. I'll never forget my first ever goal-setting dinner. And it was.
I already told Matt.
Yeah, I heard about this today.
We went in there and we had dinner and we didn't have anybody come. It was really a tight deal. And I remember going home to my wife and saying, I don't really think that's how this is supposed to work.
We got the 3 reminders.
Yeah, this is your goal. Okay. And really, I ran home and went, I don't think I'm going to like this. So this is so refreshing. I think that a year from now, when we take this again, which, okay, Belton, Texas, old school, raised here, I kind of take some of this stuff with a grain of salt because it's probably written by somebody who doesn't have any idea who we are in Belton, Texas. But I do think you can pull some meaningful things from some of these things. But I'll never forget that night when I went home and went, I don't know about this.
That's good.
That's not Belton ISD anymore. It's just not.
And this is our first real assessment, so, when we were answering these questions, if there had been like a time frame attached to it in the last 24 months or
Yes.
18 months, then answer it from that standpoint. So answering these questions is a little tricky.
Okay, so I didn't mess that right. I was taking this going,
I
I
did a
was
lot
supposed
of
to have
that.
done this
It
before.
took a
Done a
long
lot of
time to do
stuff.
this. Yeah, for me.
What is your thought, though? When a board member's taking this, should it be present-minded, or should it be, what is it?
And how present-minded,
No,
I mean.
I actually think it's good the way you did it, because now this conversation is emerging partly as a result of that. It wasn't the last 6 months, it wasn't the last year, and of course, that COVID thing happened, so the value is, as Ty's already alluded, to do this again in a year, and there's no charge to just complete this and get a report, or to even consider doing it in 6 months. And then what you get back in the report is a bar that's one lane over top of the other, so it shows, okay, this is what we were saying last year, June, July, and this is what we're saying this next year, or 6 months, whatever you wanted to do, might be a consideration. Let's try to go through a few pages. Basing your decisions on what's best for student success. Everybody's marking most of the time or always. Commit to a clear and shared purpose, the same. Next page, very similar. This is all about responsible school governance. Question on number 9, and somebody really honest put, don't know. Does the board set goals for its improvement? Not for the district to improve, but for the Yes, no, maybe?
Well, we looked at the parchment.
Well, yeah, we do this.
We figured out which commandment we wanted to,
Yeah.
to improve on.
The whole
And-
area.
But I'm not sure that we necessarily revisited that after, yeah.
So, I mean, here's just a thought, and I know superintendents cringe with different sets of goals laying around, but the board thinking about, what does the board want to do, or simply, what will the board do? It doesn't have to be glamorous or glorious. What are we gonna do this year to improve as a board? That'd be an ongoing question that we'll come back to.
I think that's a tough one in the situation that we were put in. Literally 10 days after we hired, or you took the job or started, and you started earlier than we thought you were going to,
Yeah.
which was an unbelievable blessing.
Yeah, no kidding.
It really was. And we didn't have that. He wasn't going to start till after spring break. Well, it ended up being the longest spring break ever.
Yeah.
So he came on 10 days early. If we wouldn't have had that, I don't know.
Yeah.
But honestly, to go through hiring a new superintendent, going through the worst year ever, I don't know if that's really easy to answer those questions right now. Because how do we really have a goal? We're still formulating our relationships and our goals, but I love the process that we've been able to see and be a part of. I think that's a really hard question to answer right now.
We're gonna be asking you some questions here in a few minutes about that may lend itself to a goal for the board. So, hang on to that. The rest of this, again, here, this is just responsible school governance. So, the only thing worthy of a conversation on the next page, 7, is question 12. Your board operating procedures. Do you use those written protocols for the way you interact with each other? And a couple people weren't sure you did that all the time.
Clearly not off a policy
Policy committee people.
It was probably me,
Yeah.
and I'm probably the one that don't know a lot. Because I had that one, the two that you're talking about, I even starred because I was thinking, are those minutes? Are those, I wasn't sure what written protocol for interactions really were.
What does this question even mean?
It's good.
What does it even mean?
Do you follow your board operating procedures?
Absolutely.
Says the head of the policy
Okay, now worded like that.
Manual
yes.
says we better be on time.
Yes, worded like that.
Yes.
Do we, yeah,
That's what, I mean, the question I thought was a bit vague, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Well, in some states, it's called a protocol, or in other states, it's called other things.
I took that to mean
Norms.
And the way I took that when I looked at this data though was also, those were heavily refined when Robin was here, right?
Yes.
And so those are relatively new to this board as well. So when I saw that distribution of scores there, I just took it as, well, these are still relatively new. And when I say Robin, she was the interim superintendent before me. Robin Battershelf, who was the superintendent at Temple before. And our board and our policy committee had done extensive work on developing those. So for me, when I saw that distribution, it made total sense to me. It's about, are we constantly looking at them, using them to better our relationship and better our
And something you guys may not be aware of is whenever we were in between the old superintendent and the new superintendent, we hired a interim, and she came in and changed the game for us.
In good ways.
Yes,
Good.
she was this breath of fresh air,
Nice.
a 60-mile-an-hour breath of fresh air, because it really wasn't a healthy working relationship in the team of 8. And she came in and just took, I don't know, it's really hard to explain how things changed at the administration building overnight. And then for us, she brought an idea that she used in a former district where she allowed us to be on the policy committee and the facilities committee. So we got to roll up our sleeves and work with the administrators, the admin team, and get in the weeds. And since then, it has raised our level of ownership in this thing. And I live for
It
facilities,
goes back to
by the
that
way.
advocacy thing.
Yes.
Now I feel like an advocate because we have direct lines of communication to our administrators. There's no block in between us. And
So you
it's-
know what to advocate
Yeah,
for.
and we get to sit in meetings and sit down and talk with them as a group, and there's freedom in that, and we can bring things to the table, and it's been so fantastic.
Yeah, that was a big,
Go ahead, sir.
it just was a huge step for us as a group to bring that accountability and ownership. And we've functioned completely differently since all that happened.
you know, when we're talking about what boards shouldn't do, so when you go talk to other boards, I think one thing you need to tell us is don't be a rubber stamp.
There you go.
Yeah.
Because if you're a rubber stamp, and that means for failure, there's only maybe one or two people running the entire district.
When Tom and I put together that book, the subtitle is A Balanced Governance Approach. The idea is you don't want to be a rubber stamp board, you don't want to be an overly micromanaging board. So where's that healthy place in the middle of engagement and informed oversight? I kind of like that term, informed oversight. What does that look like?
Informed oversight. To me, I mean, we're always looking at what Chris always, his pet peeve is he wants some data. Okay, he wants data. Is this working or is it not working?
Show me the numbers, guy.
Show me the numbers, okay? Because the numbers don't lie, right? So, informed oversight, what Matt calls us, talks to us about things. Sometimes he sends us a text and I think, well, wait a minute, we don't really need to know about that. But I'd rather him do, I'd rather him do more than not enough, right?
You don't want to find out at the grocery store.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, okay, am I taking his time?
Right.
I don't call him unless I really need to, all right? But he has set up times where he's talking to all of us now, right? So we all have a role, we all have a say, all right? We're not a rubber stamp. And we've set up things that way because now if anybody that comes in on this board now is going to have to play a role. And if you're not going to play a role, you're not going to be able to function here. Okay? So the way we've set things up, you have to participate. You mean something. Okay? So when we say we're governing with 8 folks, we really are. All right? And we don't, the way that Matt communicates with us, if, you know, we're talking about accountability, we're talking about accountability is all the way up and down. And it ends here, right? But if there's an issue, say, hey, Matt, man, we need to take care of this, don't we? We need to take a good look at it. We have to be willing to engage Matt and say, you know what, that's not going too well, okay? And because of the way he engages us, I'm not afraid to tell him that. And I likewise told him, hey, if we're doing something that you think is taking us the wrong way, it works both ways. We got to be able to communicate.
Right.
You know, if things aren't going so well, we got to be willing to have that conversation. We're always willing to have that conversation when things are really going well, right?
That's good. That's super healthy.
So I think
One other real
that's
quick
insight.
thing, something else that's been brought on by Matt that we never did get in the past, and it may have been more informally, but it just wasn't, is our monthly meetings, where I'll think about it all month.
And he does.
Yes, I've got problems, I've got issues, I've been approached by this, I've been emailed by that, and I want to talk about it. And that is empowerment, but it's also collaborative, and it really is the people, the community, having a voice straight to the superintendent. And that's what we are. So I really appreciate that, Matt, for you doing that for us.
I mean, I was just, maybe along the same lines, right? The informed governance, it's got to be a 360 informed, right? It's got to be all the constituents around. Like, we're not going behind Matt's back and running to, you know, somebody in the grocery store and talk about how things are going on the soccer field or whatever, right? But it's got to be informed from everybody, right? The whole 360 view of who the constituents are.
That's part of transparency. I think the old school superintendent training was all about, okay, there's 2 forms. You can either tell the board nothing and say, no, that's none of your business, you're micromanaging, or you can tell them everything and just snow them with data and they won't know what to ask, right? So this idea of a collaborative relationship with the board and superintendent, that's a fairly new idea. That's not something people were talking about in superintendent preparation programs 15 years ago, probably even 10. It's a fairly new idea that you're actually open and honest and having sort of that role clarity, but yet communication across the lines, and a whole lot less of this is mine and that's yours, but more let's have a conversation about it.
You know, as a member of the general public, I had no idea. I mean, some of the things that I used to say, you know, I feel really stupid now.
Well, how would you know, right?
Well, I mean, I was ignorant to so many things. I mean, I learn every time I come, I learn something every time I engage with this administration. I learn something all the time. You know, just the stuff that we had here recently, listening to those lectures. when you hear other school boards and what they're facing, their challenges and what they're doing about things, I mean, this is a difficult, I mean, you feel somewhat uninformed, not from, they're not giving us information, but this is a whole new lingo.
Yeah.
This is a whole new way of thinking. There's a lot to this. It's not easy. It's not easy, and I struggle, and I know everyone else does here, I struggle to make the right decision, to do what's best for everyone, as best as we can.
And that's the thing, right? You've got to take your individual self out of this. Having been on the board for as long as I've been on the board, I know that we cannot function individually. We cannot individually go about in this community representing Area 3, Area 2 individually.
Right.
We represent all children. I don't represent just all the African American children in Bell County or in Belton. I represent all children. Every area, no matter, from corner to corner, I represent all children. And it's that mindset. If you get away from, I'm getting on this board and I'm gonna fire the coach or I'm gonna do this or that. There's no I in team. I can't do anything. This takes a team. It's a team effort.
You got to at least count 4. Right. But, yeah, fascinating. Question 13. We got to move a little bit faster. Just a little, not a lot.
Well, you have to understand, we're a baby board in some respects, because we're letting you know that we're brand new as a team. This is the first time as a team we've been able to really sit down and have this collaboration with Matt in this manner. So we're all telling our testimonies and praising him, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
So we just ask for a little grace.
There's a lot of co-teaching going on too.
Yes,
right?
yes.
You're sharing
Yes.
your wisdom and insight.
Yes.
Can I say one thing?
Okay.
Is that all right? I don't want to throw you out, but one of the things that struck me, and Phil can probably speak to this more than I can, but coming from different states and being an administrator in different states, the first time I heard the term team of 8 was when I came to Texas. I didn't hear it when I was in Arizona as an administrator or in Oregon as an administrator. And so when I bring that up, the concept between, when you talk about this balanced approach to governance and this teamwork, I think Texas has done a really good job of promoting that and trying to make sure that we are focused on a team approach with governance and administration and all of it. And what's refreshing to me here is in Belton ISD is I feel like that it is directly what Suzanne said. We represent every kid in the district, and we take that to heart. This group takes that to heart, and I feel it every time.
Well, boards that don't get over that hurdle and imagine that they only are representing students or teachers or schools or community members in that single member district, they fail.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in the newspapers or TV. Where in Oregon?
They're giving their.
I was in Hillsborough.
Okay. We'll come back to that. Question 13. There's an area for conversation. Actually, this is probably who's the chair of the policy committee?
The lawyer.
Oh! So it's a pretty tricky question, right? Do you govern using policies that align with research-based best practices? This is a question I ask our policy folks all the time. Policies that you get from TASB, they're a group of attorneys sat down and said, okay, here's what the law says, right? Your legal policies. It's your local policies.
Well, I mean, we feel kind of strapped to follow what your lawyer said.
Well, yeah, because it's
sometimes
their...
I don't necessarily agree with y'all's interpretation sometimes, but that's just me. But we have our own counsel also.
Okay, good.
Okay, so, my thinking is that if we've got some leeway here and we really don't like the interpretation, then we'll go to our own lawyer.
Right.
And then, we'll decide then, because, he's responsible to us. I mean, not that you guys don't do a great job. Okay?
No, I mean,
but
you're talk to 5 attorneys, you get 25 opinions. I mean, no offense.
Yeah. So this is another one of those questions that's like, okay, give me an example. What did you mean by that? What does this question mean?
Well, I think we would go in Texas specifically into the localized policies.
Mm-hmm.
So teacher assignment, staffing ratios, teacher pay, professional development,
GPA policies.
I can tell you that if something comes up, like if I've had a discussion with Matt or any other administrators, and they ask a question about something, say, well, what does our policy say? I mean, my thinking, and it's always been, is that, well, we're not going to do anything that's in contravention of our policy. And if our practice has changed, then maybe we need to take a look at that policy And if we can change it and it's still in compliance with the law, then let's do it. Because it has to always have a local flavor if it can.
Right. Right, that's the point. But the, so what does the research say? How does that apply to our setting? What are the districts around us doing? Those are sort of three big questions that should inform localized policy. Like, what are the other districts like us? What are they doing that we should consider? And then Matt and his team bringing, here's what the research suggests makes a difference for student learning, GPA, whatever those policies are where you have a good amount of latitude.
We've had an extensive dissection of EIC local, which is our grading and our ranking policy. Okay. And we're trying to coincide that with lots of things. We've got a journey of a graduate picture
That you want to line
that
up.
we want to line up.
Yeah.
We want to align it with. We're looking at, we've talked to students. We've gotten data from students as to what their reaction was. You know, we've had discussions amongst us. We have two schools. We have New Tech, and then we've got Belton High School. You know, how are we going to do that with ranking? Should we have one valedictorian? Should we have two? How does one affect the other? What are other schools doing? What are they doing in Houston? What are they doing down in Austin? You know, what's Westlake doing? What are colleges and universities looking at?
Right.
Do we just rank the top 10%? Do we rank just the top 25%? What do we do? Do we allow students to take more courses, have more choices, as opposed to being strapped down and saying, well, I got to get that GPA, but I really want to take this course. I really want to explore that. Maybe I like that. Maybe that's something I want to do later. But look, we're looking at all those things. Okay. So when I look at this question, I thought, wait a minute, that's what we're doing. So I hope I'm in the green, right? Because I think that's what we do.
Or did you talk yourself in a circle?
Yeah.
No, I'm saying to you, because when I read it, the way you described it,
Yeah.
then I think I understand, not from the, I'm not smart enough to be on policy, I'm with the group. Which is the fun group.
The fun group.
The facility side. But I didn't understand that, but the way you just mentioned in best practices, you know, in business, you know, we always have our best practices that we can go to, industry standards that tell us, you know, what we do. But now that you framed it that way, then, you know, I think I'm in the green, but I don't know, because what you said is talking about local, you know, how do we, well, if we look at how we do, and we just finished it last month, how do we come up with our pay scale for our teachers? We don't come up with that. They give us the data that says, here are like districts to us. Not necessarily the surrounding districts. We know what they do too. It's all public information. But here's the districts that we're striving to be like. Here's who we're competing with. And we've always said we're not trying to keep up with the Joneses. We're not, but we understand that a teacher, you know, has a choice to be somewhere. We have to be competitive, you know, in our salary, in our culture, and all the things that we do. So the way you framed it, and I think they need to redo the way they ask the question, because yeah, the salaries is a very good example of how we do it. You know, we look at what everybody else is paying, decide who we want to be like.
Hey,
And
real
we're
quick,
those people.
on your EIC local, my youngest is, you know, interviewing to go to schools. We were at Dallas Baptist on Friday. They're not looking at class rank. They're not looking at SAT.
Dude, I could get into a school.
Because of COVID. Now, after a year of them not doing that, they may dust off their things and say, we don't need that anymore. So it's definitely something we need to look at in the future, because the way schools are looking at things, especially out-of-state schools, is different than what we're used to with some of this stuff. And something else too, Phil, is that right?
Yeah.
We have a very good relationship with our local representatives in Austin. Our two local state representatives, Buckley and Shine, we got to go down. Matt arranged for three of us to go down and sit in their offices and talk to them. A couple months ago while they were in session, we got to meet with Senator Buckingham. And one of the things that we stressed was, don't take away our local control. You don't know better than we do for our kids. Because you don't have to drive very far south to get into District City. We don't want to be like, from a philosophy standpoint. So we want to keep as much local control as possible. And I think we have a very Belton flavor now with the dusting off of our entire policy. We have a very Belton flavor, and we're keeping more of our mores and our vision here, because of the work these people are doing on our policy committee. And that's very important to me.
Well, let's look at just one more question. Question 19 on standard one. I think we need a 10-minute break. It's that time. Question 19, work with the superintendent to achieve mutual trust and commitment. Every single person that responded put always. And I just want to call that out as really critical to success. I know there's some things in here on continuous improvement and professional development and collaborating with colleagues, that's all good, but you don't get anywhere without trust. I mean, it's foundational. Things happen faster, they happen quicker, they happen cheaper when there's high trust. And when there's not high trust, that's in the newspapers. Right?
And that leads to our ability to talk about the good and the not so good.
Yes. Yeah, that gives you the ability to ask the tough questions and to talk about the dirty laundry.
Right. He wants to hear it.
Right.
I know he does.
Well,
He does.
in my mind, the idea, if I can't rely on our board to give me good feedback, then who can I rely on?
Right.
And I know being in an unpaid position, you don't do this just out of because you're getting paid dollars. You do this because you care about the community and the kids. And so if I can listen well and we can have that open, honest dialogue back and forth, I think it makes us that much stronger.
10-minute break, okay?
10 minutes.
Mr. President?
Sounds good. 10 minutes.
Let's go to standard 2. This is the one we mentioned earlier. Y'all did pretty good on. And this is very closely associated with students achieving well. Do you, through your actions and policies, express your belief that all students should learn, foster collaboration? I'm moving really quickly. Pages 12 and 13 I'm done with already. Page 14 I'm done with. Together with the superintendent, agree that high expectations for all students is the highest priority. Together with the superintendent, reviews student achievement data regularly. That's one of those questions, right, Eric?
But you forgot about the one about facilities.
Did I skip facilities altogether? You know, our
Bill,
facilities.
don't do that, I'll just tell
I
you.
know, our
We
facilities.
scored 100% on that one. I'm very proud of that.
Wait, which question?
33.
Oh, I didn't get to that yet.
Oh,
That's
okay.
the whole thing.
You were going so fast, I just want to make sure.
Well,
Just skip it on purpose now.
not just speaking to the audience here, but we're preaching to the choir. Facilities do make a big difference, right? They do make a big difference in student learning, and the right amount of lighting, the ventilation, the space, the cleanliness, all of that makes a difference. So, yeah, you all evidently spend some time. Warren and I noted that last week. It's like, oh yeah, they've been nailing that one.
That's because that group's tight, really tight.
And the safety and security stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does you call it your facilities committee, does it also talk about school safety?
We get a safety report from Mike Morgan every year.
Yeah.
But, 2 years ago, before COVID was ever even thought about, when Santa Fe and those things happened, we did a walkthrough. Dr. Crabshaw came in. Well, Susan had already started.
Yes.
We really kind of leaned on her and said, we got to make our school safer. Because it doesn't matter what you're teaching.
Right.
If your teachers and kids aren't safe, what difference does it make? So we started building vestibules, we started upgrading doors, we started doing cameras. We really spent a lot of money on that part of the infrastructure. Like when we built this building, $120-something million, as soon as Robin got here, she said the front of this building's not adequate, so we spent money. So we've spent a ton of money on safety for our students and our faculty and our people. We really have.
Well, and it shows in this building that safety was a concern in the design.
Yes.
I mean, it does.
Well, and furthermore, we actually are integrally involved in this process to the point that we can say always. We can clearly say always.
Right.
Where a couple years ago might have been maybe yellow.
And I don't mean to take up your time, but we had a comprehensive facilities analysis done. We brought in a firm that had 3 firms working under that firm that went to every single building. They walked every square inch. They counted every hot water heater. They counted every air conditioner. They walked every inch of roof in our district. And come to find out, our district, even the old buildings, are amazingly well preserved and well kept, and there's still healthy learning environments going on even in our older schools. So we were very impressed with what the previous administration had done from a facility standpoint. We didn't have anything that was ragtag out there in the district, and anything that was a little bit so-so, we've already addressed those issues.
Well, and the deal is really, I mean, while the safety and security of students and staff is a priority, ultimately, this is also about the purpose for why you're there, which is learning, right? And that the facilities are conducive to that, so hats off there. That was 33, 34, check. Looking at standard 3, this is conditions for success. So there's kind of a relationship, but the types of questions asked here get a little fuzzier, and they're probably things you don't like. The policies that ensure hiring and retention of highly qualified staff, the people are a little less certain that's the way we do it. Policies for evaluating staff based on student success, policies that support research best practices for staff development. Here's an area where the board might say, we'd like to learn more about that this year. Dr. Smith, let's have a workshop, or let's have your team come in and tell us, what are we doing in these areas? That's about it.
A question about that, because, and I thought about these when I read them, especially 36, 37. Although we could be given updates, we can be told, there is no one sitting, y'all excluded, there's no one on this board who knows enough about these two. I mean, we could be given reports. The student achievement was one thing because there's benchmarks or things we can look at, data we can be given. But as far as policies that support the research base, so the professional development of the staff, if you tell us that none of us are in a situation to be able to say, well, I don't think that that's correct. I mean, so I wonder how, to me, these are ones where is the board getting in over its skis to where they really don't know these things. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, there's a risk there. And some would say, well, boards have no business being involved in educational matters anyway. But then it's like, well, wait a minute, we are the board of education.
I guess the difference between the difference between being informed
And
on
being
some,
an expert.
and being an expert, right? And I want to be informed, but I don't need to be able to tell you that we're using this for staff development. I can do that in my own company because it's what I do all the time. But I don't, if there's 4 different staff development tools out there,
Right.
I have to trust, we have to trust that whoever the administration picks to use, that's a trust issue that, okay, we're going to trust that you have picked the best professional development out there.
And when they give you their rationale behind that, you
Right.
can develop that confidence that, Matt and Melinda, we get it, right?
Right.
It's just really a matter of them sharing that with you, that insight.
Okay.
Bringing you in on it. I totally agree. I mean, our system is lay elected citizens governing the school. So you're not supposed to be educational experts, and you've got a couple people that come from a background in education, which is normal, typical, but it doesn't, that's not their job on the school board, is
Right.
to be the educational expert. It's to be the citizen expert, right? What are the citizens wanting and needing? And as you represent them, it's, again, it's asking Matt and Melinda and his team, so what are we doing around professional development?
When you're married to a teacher in the district, you know when there's good training, and you know when there's not. I hear that. Just saying.
Wasted or not,
Yes.
Phil, that question to me was more like, does a policy exist? So the question should be, does you have a policy on this, and if you do you use it?
Policies for evaluating staff based on student success.
Because we could all say, well,
We do or we don't.
we either do or we don't. And if we don't, then should we? And obviously we should, and I think we do. Yeah.
You're gonna know more about that one soon.
Yeah.
Just my guess.
Yeah. Well, I want to say this for the record, we should be all green on question 13. But for the vagueness of the question, notwithstanding the vagueness of the question, we should have all green.
How bad was it?
Yeah.
So question 41. Question 41 is the good one.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one, now we don't really do it that way in Texas.
Thank goodness.
Oh, good, that's what
Sweet, we passed.
The State Board of Education adopts curriculum standards and
That's
extra
right.
standards, and here's your curriculum options. Sometimes, some districts have supplemental materials, and the board will say, yes, the community was involved in some supplemental materials. But yeah, you nailed that one. You said all except for one, and it's wrong button.
The thing, the way I read that too, though, is that when we go out, so to Phil's point is, the state Board of Education creates standards for the state, adopts standards for the state, and we have a list of resources that are provided. The thing that we can continue to do better as an administrative team is make sure that when we're going through and vetting those state-approved resources, that we're able to have multiple layers where people weigh in. And normally, school districts have an opportunity for community to view materials and weigh in ahead of time before materials are adopted. I wasn't here for the last adoptions, the big adoptions in Belton ISD, but I think moving forward, that's just one of those things that you always make sure you do, is allow for voice in the process and not after the fact, trying to get ahead of it.
Do you adopt a budget that supports quality staff development and resources for curriculum implementation? Pretty much, or don't know. These are all, you know, again, these are,
This one for 17.
Oh, I'm sorry.
what page?
Going backwards on it.
Oh, yeah, we were on question 41, you jumped backwards to question
Yeah.
40. There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric.
I do know that in our budget, though, there's over three, is it 3, 4, what is it that we spend on staff development and training, and there's a lot of money that we do spend on that, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing, and I think we've started putting this in the language of our meetings, is that this is why the school board hires a superintendent, and they put together a staff, and they put together people that have backgrounds in curriculum and in what we feel, based on Belton's community values, what we feel like we need to be doing, and then we gear our training towards those things. That's not for the school board to administer, that's his job. So we make sure there's money in the budget for these things to happen. But like this year with some of our ESSER funds and stuff like that, we went to the community and said, what do you want us to do? We have to meet certain guidelines, but what does the community's input want? And that's where some of those things came about, from community input, 100%. Where do these funds need to go? Now, not everybody's going to agree with every single penny, but we tried to use the voice of the community to make sure that those things were happening. So I'm hoping I put green on that one, because I know we do spend a lot of money on training our people, because education evolves every year. It's kind of like being an accountant. You have to go to school every 2 years to keep. Yes, so education is the same way.
And what keeps us in the governance area is the policy and then the budget, right? So the fiscal responsibility, oversight, you govern through policy. That's, looking at the next page or two, still on standard 3, the long-term facilities plan in place. Do you have one, Todd?
Yes, sir.
That would should be all green.
Did we
Absolutely.
not get 100% on that?
Did we not?
Well,
Oh, those are 3 people that came from policy committee. They didn't.
I've been on both sides of the fence. I know.
Communicate an expectation, I'm on question 45, that all classrooms implement effective instructional practices. You know, this is part of that vision and journey that you all have been working on. We're going to get into, I'm going to skip to standard 4, next page or 2, lots and lots of green. Everywhere where it had anything to do with the district's finances, y'all are just green.
We won an award this year.
For your fiscal
Here's
oversight.
another one, that's
Absolutely.
Texas student number 48.
What? 48.
Seek public input during the budget process. Do you do that? Do you do that? Should you do that? You've got to
Yeah, we have public hearings,
Yeah.
and so we
Yeah.
give
Does
the
anybody come up?
opportunity not to speak on that, not
Yeah.
lately.
Yeah.
We've had others, but not on that. But we do have hearings, we're required to by law. We have to have those. And we revisit the budget throughout the entire year. We're getting updates on the process by which that's going to be implemented.
It's a bigger area of concern when we're having to make cuts,
Yeah.
which everybody was imagining we would be doing this next year, but with the federal money, we're not.
Yeah.
But that's a bigger issue, like knowing which programs or what to eliminate, sometimes having broad community input is really helpful.
Mhm.
One of the things that we're trying to do is using Journey of a Graduate and the strategic plan is by engaging those large number of community members and having a plan in place, you all as a board of trustees know what they said and what the priorities were, and then you're able to say, does our budget line up with the priorities that our community has set too? So it's been a process to lay out a direction for the future, and then our job along the way is to make sure that those resources align up with that direction.
Right, well, that's what Jennifer in the last meeting presented.
That was the grants.
With the ESSER funds and said, here's what the community, that's what you were just talking about, but she was able to put them into the different silos and say, 1, 2, 3, here's what the community said they wanted, here's where this money's going.
And then they let us drill down on a couple of the topics that had been brought to our attention, and we were able to get clarification on those things to where the public understands, what those concepts were for some of those funds, so.
See, it's good, because there's a lot of these questions, it does take a little bit of discussing to remember how we do that, because it is done, it just doesn't come to mind, because there's a lot of things.
Well, we don't blatantly say, so at this point, we're gonna do this in order to get the public input on this, and yeah.
Well, the whole next page on standard 4, page 22, is all about kind of your district improvement plans, campus improvement plans, which you do generally in September. So, it's not going to be top of mind, and certainly not top of mind in a COVID year. Nothing stands out here other than, you do follow a schedule, everybody agrees. And just kind of knowing that, but being thoughtful. I want to come back to, we sort of started with this, Warren mentioned it, but when we were looking at what is exceptional governance, what is the difference between good governance and great governance? Focus, align, stretch, track, evaluate, revise. It became an acronym for us faster, right? Focus, align, stretch, track, evaluate, revise. So is the board focused? And are you aligning efforts? And this whole page with questions 52 through 55 is all about is our district improvement plan aligned with our strategic plan? Is that aligned with our campus improvement plans? Are we all on a similar page? And
So I was in a vehicle going on a tour of some facilities. We're looking towards the future, so we went to tour some facilities. And Dr. Golden was in the vehicle with me, and she was on a Zoom. And I got to hear firsthand how the Journey of a Graduate is the backbone of what we're doing. And I told Matt afterwards, I said, I was so impressed by being able to just listen in to what they were talking about, because it proved to me that there is 100% alignment in this district from top to bottom. It's not just, we're not just scatter shooting out there. It is refined and it is up and down. And I was impressed by what I heard that day from that meeting. I was just eavesdropping.
It's not just words to check a box to say you've done something. If there's an authenticity behind it for a purpose.
that's good.
One of the most frustrating things as a school principal I found was when I knew the areas for improvement as a school leader, but I was forced to create a plan that didn't align with the areas for improvement. So our job throughout the year has really been trying to align, starting with our district goals that y'all adopted last June, and that will be brought back to this next board meeting. Take those goals, and they should permeate our campus improvement plans and our district improvement plan, but it's not cookie cutter. It's not me saying every school you have to do these things. It's in context. So as a principal at that school, you should be able to say, for goal number 2, ensuring exceptional learning and experiences for each and every student. Well, at Sparta Elementary School, that might look a little different than it would at Charter Oak Elementary School, depending on the needs of the students and the needs of their teachers. And so their job is to take that and create the context for their school. They're still working toward the goal. It's just going to look a little bit different. And so our hope is that alignment keeps, we're going to continue preaching that over and over again, but alignment doesn't mean cookie cutter all doing the same thing. Alignment means pointing all in the same direction.
And I think Belton started this in the 90s, working towards our CTE development. And I think this is a big part of this each and every concept now. And because it's our job to oversee student success, and that may not be college route. That may be what can we do to prepare these kids for a job someday, a career. That may not have to do with academia. That may have to do with being an automotive technician, being a chef, being a nurse. So we've worked really hard on our CTE, and we're gonna really revisit this in this next push towards the future. Bond things like that. We're really gonna dig deep into this CTE program, because I personally, I've got 3 kids, 2 in college and 1 fixing to be there. I personally know that not every kid has to go get rubber stamped at a college to have success. And I think we're moving towards that CCMR, towards that concept more and more, because that pulls in a whole nother set of kids to guarantee them success down the road. And I love that part of what we do.
Because that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
When they leave your system, they're prepared for what's next.
Absolutely. Give them a job.
I just glanced at the time. Are there any areas here, any items that cause you to pause that you'd like to talk a little further about? Or should we move to the next thing? Because we want to get into your draft strategic planning goals a bit and give opportunity for some conversation about that on the governance part.
I do want to bring up question 55. I told Jeff earlier today, I'm on a culture mission this year, and being able to really dive into, we've been through a tough year, and making sure that our staff, our community, our students, everybody understands and feels the things that we're proud of in our school system. And I don't know, and it was interesting looking at the distribution of this question 55 too, are there ways that we need to talk about learning differently from your point of view, or celebrate learning differently from your point of view as a board of trustees?
And I think Suzanne brought this out several meetings ago when we were recognized. We always recognize our high achievers in our board meetings, our state qualifiers, the ones that do great things. And Suzanne brought out something that's been several meetings ago. She says, well, what about the other kids? And our communications department took that and has ran with it. And we highlight multiple kids a week that are just doing their thing. They're not achieving at a state level. They're not winning awards, but they come to school every day and they're making a difference. And they're doing good things for people. And we started highlighting those people. So that's a movement in that direction that I appreciated your input. And I'm proud of our communications department for taking the ball and running with that one. I like that one.
Recognizing students for good citizenship and those kinds of things.
Just being a good kid and a good student. Wow.
What about teacher recognition?
All the time. Staff gets recognized. You go on our website today, BISD, you'll see a staff member being recognized.
We have this thing called Big Red Heart Awards, and
Yeah.
anybody in the community, any staff person, anybody can nominate literally anyone within the district, from janitor to administrator, doesn't matter, and say what they've done great. And HR comes around and gives them an award and a little pin.
Just a few tears get shed on
There we go.
I let you go to this.
Those are
And
awesome.
this year, there were a lot that students recognized their teacher. So
Really?
these letters
Okay.
came from they were from their kids and from many parents.
Nice. Heartfelt stuff.
Many parents and students.
And while we're headed into the goal areas and the journey, you might be thinking about how will you celebrate success on those items as success is attained, or whoever it is, whatever staff member or parent or family or student. Community engagement again, it was good to hear some of the things that you're doing in that area.
I was disappointed at 63
Yeah.
being so low. I don't know that I believe that.
Advocate at the state,
Local and federal levels, I mean, we got to go to Austin. I have a very good dialogue with Representative Buckley and Hugh Shine all the time. I'm always out there advocating for
So
our
you
district
were-
and our kids.
So you were agreeing, and others were maybe not advocating at the same
Yeah.
extent.
And I'm with local leadership all the time, city council, city managers, people from other school boards. I feel like we probably need to improve on that as a group, but I'm always out there.
I feel like we do that.
Yeah.
Anything else on there? Last page or two. Question 67, interesting. You might think about how the board ensures the public's well informed of the board's roles and responsibilities.
I think we were made well aware that we need to work on that this last year. I think people think that we ride in here on a white horse and can do everything, and it's very, very poignant as to what we can and can't do. And I didn't know any better when I first got on the board. I thought I was riding that same horse. So I think, yeah, that's probably something we need to work on.
Yeah. It's not a natural thing that people understand what the school board does.
It's a complicated thing.
I want to go back to, I'm going to speak at this second ago, over on 64, where it's model cultural, racial, and ethnic understanding and sensitivity. When I first got on the board, that was not anything that was really discussed. Anytime you talk about race, that's a hard discussion. And I will tell you that Dr. Smith has welcomed those discussions. We're constantly in dialogue about how we do that better here in Belton. And so I think as a school district as a whole, that is something definitely that is that we're working on. And we're better today than we were in 2013.
Do you feel good, Suzanne, that the board is modeling that cultural, racial, and ethnic understanding?
Absolutely.
Good.
Look at us.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think for me on this one, if I go back to that idea of each and every, here's what I take, and I believe that we all take this, but we represent every student in every family in our system. And so sometimes that comes with feedback in various ways that we may not feel comfortable with, but it's important for us to be able to continue to use that to represent every student in the system. Use an example coming up, we have tomorrow evening meeting with a group of parents who have students with special education needs. And sitting down, being able to understand their story, hear their feedback, and talk to them about some of the priorities in our strategic plan to be able to say, does this represent you well? Do you have the opportunity to see yourself in our system with this work that we're doing? And we're constantly working on that. And I think we do need to, as a leader, I think I do need to continue to take steps to model that and listen, particularly with our colleagues of color and our families of color in our system, because my job is to serve everyone in our system.
Yeah, especially anyone that feels unheard.
Absolutely.
I know Ty was talking earlier about how Belton has changed, and it's not always a color change, it can be a values and experience changes, the way certain cultures learn, depending on how, transient they are. This is incredible to think about, and offering more CC, whatever the case may be. So,
I think it's important to be willing to learn and listen and broaden your own perspective. And even though it may be something I may or may not agree with, I still value what you say and what, is important to you. I think that's been something that's been really important to me, especially this year. I've had some friends that they just don't agree, but I want to know. And can we still be friends? And so I think that, just broadening our own perspective is important.
That's good. I'm sitting here thinking about, some of the things that we've had to listen to and some of the conversations we've had. Prior to Dr. Smith, it just seemed as if when I started on the board, we just never had any troubles. Everything was just the greatest school in the whole district. But there was an awakening in Belton in this last year or so that people are more self-aware and they want us to be aware that they are aware. People are woke, as the term is. I heard that recently. People are woke, and that's good because we need to know that. We need to know, like you said, we need to be able to listen and understand from someone else's perspective. It's good that we get information from the administrators and their recommendations, but we need to hear from the community what their thoughts are and how they feel about a situation, because it may be that one thing that goes, you know what, we didn't think about that. As a team, we didn't think about that. Let's talk about it. So this is good.
One of the things I'm most proud of over the last year is we had a focus group during our strategic planning process with our Spanish-speaking families and invited them in and hosted it entirely in Spanish because as parents, we want to listen to them too. And as a monolingual male leader in the system, I don't have that ability. But we had the ability to do that with some facilitation and stuff, and that those perspectives in our district matter, and I'm proud of that.
So, just a quick recap. This tested your behavior practices in 5 key standards, having a statistical correlation with improving student performance. This is how you work. I'm so glad that you all are willing to engage in a conversation and even pointedly say, we're enjoying this time talking together, getting to know each other. We're a fairly new team together. Not always new to the board, but a new team. The tenor and the modeling that you set tonight is what's going to be helpful going forward when we think about the what. This is how we work. Let's talk now about the mission part. What do we apply this to? Right? We have this idea of some skills, we're going to have a conversation and understanding where we might be seeing different things. Let's talk about the strategic plan. Let's start high level. And then in the time we have work our way down. And when I say work our way down, at some point Matt can step in and say, based on my information, just speaking from a preliminary perspective, these are going to be focus areas or some ways we might fulfill some of these components of the vision. And then you as board members marry with that this idea, well, here's what we as elected officials know is important to our community. As board members, you're kind of brokering this product on behalf of the community, making sure those community voices, those perspectives that have been instrumental in building this actually carry through in this execution. Let's talk high level about what it is that you all want to see happen, and then very quickly move down to how do we know we're making progress? What will the board need to see to make sure that this is happening and it was more than just lip service and just listening? Does that make sense? Any questions at all? So let's start just high level. Speaking out what we want. I know the journey of a graduate is very important. Talk about how that came about. And then
I'm sitting here thinking that before we can really, and maybe we can have that kind of discussion, but I think it will be important that for those areas in here that I don't know and the some of the time, maybe there's a way to address that so that you have a more content-filled conversation going forward. Because if you've answered you don't know, then when do we address the I don't knows and those areas that we didn't score green in? Don't we eventually want to get to green at some point?
Yeah, one of the things that Phil mentioned was, I forget which question, what goals does a board set for itself, not just a district? Maybe in the last 30 minutes we come back and do another sweep through those areas very quickly, maybe highlight a few things that the board can adopt as some improvement measures. Does that work? Want to go that route? Let's do that then. So let's talk about the what. What are we accomplishing here, Belton? We know we have the graduate as a profile of the graduate. What are some big picture items? How will the board know if they're achieving? What does progress measures look like? What do the data look like? They come across the board table to let you know, yes, we're doing a good job. And again, Matt is going to help us understand some of that, how he and his team might be collecting data, what you're used to, maybe what some of your preconceived expectations are.
Is it okay if I jump in?
Absolutely.
So just refresher, you see on one of the handouts in there, it says district and board goals for 2021. Those were all adopted last year. And we then adopted key progress measures under there saying, board is, these goals were adopted, here's what we're bringing to you, we think are key progress measures that show that we're moving toward this goal that you adopted. And at the upcoming July board meeting, I'm going to give you the year report on how we feel we did. But for the two of you, we had gone into a workshop on each one of these goals throughout the year. So we were in, here's interesting truth. First one we did last year was on goal 2, exceptional learning. It was in September, and so Deanna was presenting to you data that wasn't there from STAR testing and everything else about here's where we are as a system right now. That'll be more robust over the year, but that's the system kind of that we have created so far together, is that these goals that you've adopted, we have some specific progress measures, and we report out to you on those progress measures in those workshops.
I think this next year, that's going to be really, really hard, because what was it TA said the other day, that kids lost 5.7 months?
Yeah.
Basically is what the average was that we lost during this last horrible, messed up year. So it's going to be really hard to put a number on, improvements, because there's no baseline. So we're gonna have to reset, come back, reset, and kind of build back what we lost in that process of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I think some of these numbers, because data, like we said earlier, numbers don't lie. I mean, so the CCMR number, to me, that's the one I like to look at. I want to see improvement. I want to be tracking those kids. I want to come up with a better way to track how our kids are doing after they're out of Belton. That's what I want to see. Okay, what did we score on the STAR test? What did we do? I mean, we have to do those things. But I want to see what did we do to prepare these kids for life? That's where I want to see.
And I'm not aware of a district in the state that does that.
They don't. I know.
3 to 5 years post high school.
It's really hard to do.
Students.
They're not obligated to
No,
tell
no.
you what they're doing,
Yeah.
and I think that one thing, and the way that Matt framed it, and it brings to mind some of the things like goal number 2, the ensure exceptional learning. The problem, and I think that they solved it, but one of the things that we need to remember that he said the progress measures, and those were the things that I think that are important that we get in the different school board meetings. Because if we get to the end of the year, the STAR test to me is a horrible example of one test on one day, and I've seen good kids do bad on it. I've seen kids that really didn't learn anything that knew how to take a test. But they set those different, I think you call them benchmark tests, throughout the year so that we're given the data and we know, hey, there's no surprise at the end of the year. We should know. And in fact, I think this last year, I'm going to mess this up, but one of the key areas I believe we were looking at, I want to say it was like 5th grade math. It was, when we looked at our numbers, said, okay, it could have been 5th grade math, could have been 3rd for all I know, but it's like, hey, this is where we have a big dip. Like, we're doing okay in the 5th grade math, and we knew that trying to catch those kids up, so the emphasis was, and it probably wasn't 5th grade math, that's just where our mind is. But that we said, okay, that's an area this year, because like I said, the goal doesn't change. We're never going to be able to reach goal number 2 completely. That's impossible. It's improving constantly. But what they put in place, letting us know throughout the year, okay, here's where we're at right now. Here's what these kids are doing. And if we get to the end of the year and 5th grade math is up, great. If it's not, then we also know that because along the way they were telling us, hey, this is what's coming, this is what we're doing.
Our hope in that too is that the idea of the strategic plan was to say, these are the goals that the board is adopting, and they might tweak goal 1 a little bit, but these are solid goals, and we need a plan in order to get there. So we engaged the community into diving into the how and what they thought the most important areas were, and that's what the strategic plan came from, and that's where all the community input in those sessions came from. So they said that future forward facilities matters, that engaging all voices, parents, students, everybody in our system matters in order to do these things, that exceptional learning, and that's the academic piece, that the quality of teaching, the quality of learning, the quality of assessment matters in all of this. And then these focus areas lay out some specific statements that use the one under exceptional learning. Each and every student will have experiences that grow the journey of a graduate competencies. So what was adopted in our journey of a graduate, we want to make sure that throughout the year, kids are showing their ability to persevere through challenging learning circumstances, and that we have the ability to talk to you all about those things, and that we see collaboration, that our students know how to work together in groups, because we know the workforce right now is working in groups more than ever before across different platforms than ever before. So that's the structure that we have, and our hope is that through some dialogue tonight and through some dialogue at the next board meeting that we can get to some real specifics of how can we show you as a board and make you feel good about our progress that we're making and all.
I think that is the piece that sometimes I miss is how is it being done?
Yeah.
Specifically, how are we getting them from K to 12 to graduation? What are the measures we're taking to encourage more participation in CCMR? Or
Right.
does every student have a graduation plan? I mean,
Right.
if we're talking about each and every, are the counselors, do they really have time to meet with each kid and have an individual plan of what you're going to be your plan when you graduate? I don't know, And that can't start at 12th grade. That has to start way back.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess I don't know the steps that we take,
Yeah.
or if they're yet in place. So-
Well, and I think that this is a good discussion for me, because we also can't report out on everything in our board meetings all the time. So
We
we,
would not want you to.
I can try, I can really try. But that's where the idea of key progress measures. So after we adopt these goals again in July, we're gonna come back to you in August with some ideas of key progress measures and say, as a board, what's gonna show you our progress toward meeting that goal? And what do you feel the most comfortable with? And maybe it is, under exceptional learning, that we have a key progress measure about CCMR. The thing that I want to be cautious about is we can't have 7 under each thing. And because you end up with this wide variety of goals. Now, we monitor data in a lot of ways, but we also have to be able to be focused enough, in my mind, to say, here are the key things that we believe are going to show the most growth for us under each one of those goals.
I've got one, throw in there.
All right.
I would like to see our VEX program grow by 100 students. I think it is the best thing going. I love VEX.
And that's research-based.
It is,
100%.
and those kids, we need to bring more kids that need that program into that
We
program.
do, and I
So we
think,
can track that. Yes.
I think there's ways that we could utilize staff to do something.
Brooklyn's in there.
There's two more.
Well, you keep thinking at the governance level, how does this all align towards something, right? To Matt's point, you don't want a bunch of different indicators under each goal area. How do they all build towards something that really matters, like CCMR?
I just know that my wife was a kindergarten teacher for 20 years of her career, and I just know, listening to her through the years, how kids coming from different demographics and socioeconomic backgrounds, how important the preschool program is to getting those kids up to speed. Just because of experiences and reading at home, just the things that maybe some people take for granted. So I'd love to see that program expanded, because I think we could reach more kids and get them, when they step into the first grade, kindergarten, first grade, they're ready to go. They're ready to go. And how are you going to be ready for a career sooner? By getting the fundamentals. I mean, you can't build a house without a good foundation. So I'd love to see our preschool program grow by 100 kids at least.
That's one of the best things God's got going for it.
I love going to that campus.
Well, and it's nice that it's, you know, it's free to the low socioeconomic, military, and then parents, teachers can pay tuition or just any family can pay tuition to send their kids. So it is available to all students, even in some way.
Gosh, I have so many things that are going through my mind, and Jeff's saying something, and I'm like, oh, I like that. And so I've got a lot of thoughts. You know, before I got on the board, I think what I would focus on, you would see that this is an A rated campus, or then you'd see a B, or you hear about all that. And one of the things that and Jeff said something about benchmarks. One of the things that I'm I guess wanting to know is if you have a D-rated campus, okay, and you get that in May, then you've been bleeding all year long.
Right.
Okay? So we need to find out if we can stop the bleeding in October or November, maybe we can do a lot better. So there seems to be a way of measuring that success earlier than later, because then you get a D in May, then you got 3 months, and here we are trying, we need to do something. Let's check on the principal, and what about the staff over there? But how can we change that in just 3 months, and then we get some new folks in there? It's going to take a long time to fix that mess. Okay. So when Jeff said benchmark, I mean, that's the first thing that came to my mind. The other thing that I would see here in Belton is that there was always a focus on the top of the class. Okay. And, you know, we had this thing about every kid a winner, all right? Back when my oldest was in high school, there were kids in the district that thought that was a joke, because the focus was just at the top. You didn't care about the ones in the middle, or the ones, you know, below the 50%, okay, ranking in the class. And just from what Matt says and the things that I hear him talk about, I think he really is focused on everybody. How do we make everybody better? And then I see that more when we talk about EIC local. And how we're trying to look at everything, not just the top. Because those kids at the top, they're gonna perform no matter what, okay? But there's some that are in the 50% percentile that can do so much better, they may just not know how to do that. They may have not had the guidance. And then, you know, Janice says, well, do the counselors have the resources to talk to everyone? I always tell my kids, I said, what's your plan? You know, I used to tell my oldest boy when he was in 7th grade, what's your plan? You always gotta have a plan. So I don't know that we're giving kids that guidance. So we may be doing that, but I don't know that. And if we're not, then I think that we should. Because kids don't always get it at home because the parents don't know. I mean, I came from an illiterate household. My parents couldn't guide me on what to do or not to do academically. I had to get it from the Belton Independent School District. And I received it because people cared.
So you want to see something that really does point to all kids.
Yes.
At least one of those progress measures.
That's right.
Under that category. Here's one way or two ways that we really walk out on kids.
Right. It's important for our society.
Another important idea you mentioned too was and just kind of agreeing with Jeff, you said, benchmarks. Was it Jeff? You know, I like the way you put it. We've been bleeding all year. We just didn't know come May that we had a problem.
Yeah, we got a problem.
We should have known,
let's
right?
address it sooner than later. You know, just don't you know. Well, I mean, act like that's not happening, okay? Because it's happening over there at that school.
And it sounds like it's done well. You were saying that we are really surprised by the end of the year.
No, they started that. They started when Matt got here. That was one of the things that, and we were all thrown into the fire because we'd never dealt with it before. Not that that was a bad thing. It was just a different mindset of, you know, we've got to let the board know if we're going to follow these goals and this vision, the board has to be made aware of things in real time. And like he said, you know, we can't wait till May. And, you know, if it's going to be a D in May, we need to know that sooner, not later. And I understand that the state of Texas can do some screwy things, and the next thing you know, a campus that should have been a B, which to me isn't, I don't want to get into that, but drops it to a C because they decided, oh, you know what, this criteria that we told y'all was important, yeah, we don't care about that anymore. But what is important, and I'm not going to say I don't care about the ratings of the campus, it's just I know enough about that system now to know how flawed it really is. What I do care about is that these kids are hitting these benchmarks along the way because we know that how a second grader does in certain things dictates how, not 100%, but the numbers are pretty clear. They get set on a path, and if they get off that path early on, we have to know it, and we have to get them back on that path so that they don't struggle their entire way through school because something went wrong in the second grade. We know that those formative years, you know, and I'm not going to say that if they get to 7th or 8th grade, oh, we've lost them. No, we haven't lost them, but it's going to be very hard on them to get back to where they need to be successful in life, however that looks for them. And I think that, you know, Matt and them came up with the idea of, and it was actually Rosie, which is, Erin has her place now. Rosie was real big about that was, okay, when are we going to hear back? And she was always very good about saying, when are we going to hear back? Okay, you're telling us all this stuff. Is it going to be a month?
So that's your
That's not, I need to write that down.
Yeah. That's the vision, right? Somebody has to keep the board on track on OMA, and somebody has to keep the board on track on when will we know.
And it goes back to the standard two. Let's have a quick discussion, and Matt can help us out here. So the board is conversing in the learning tools or the way you all measure assessments. What are some of the tools that the board will be hearing about in the upcoming year? What are you already familiar with? iStation, map, whatever the case. What is the board going to see when they say this is how Belton ISD, or one of the ways we measure the reading progress of a fourth grader?
So one of the things we have our district benchmarks that we've been using for years here in Belton ISD, but we also started an assessment committee this year to examine, are these the assessments that we need to use to measure the progress of our students? One of the notes that I jotted down here is that maybe the more regular sharing out of that data, maybe on a monthly, whether it's through email communication to y'all or whatever it might be, just showing you the progress along the way because we have a robust system of internal assessments that we've used here for a long time. We're going to be making some tweaks to those, but example that Jeff brought up about math and being able to take a look at our math scores based on our internal assessments that we use. Yeah, we knew we had some issues, and we talked about those mid-year this year. But I think the more frequent discussion, to Janet's point, is really resonating with me, how we get that information on a more regular basis that's not just presentation. Maybe it's just sharing the data, just being, maybe every month, being able to share a slice of the data with you to show you where we are based on when those assessments are given and what's needed.
So is that something that will come in our board report?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking right now, because I think, not, again, to the point, we can't present on everything that we possibly have to measure in our system, nor do you want me to. But certain things that we can narrow down, we might be able to just do it on a monthly or a quarterly basis, so you have that. And then when we get to the workshop discussion on exceptional learning, we're able to dive in deeper because of that data that's already there.
So think about just 3-4 things here. What data does the board need to see? What format do they need to see it in? And what discussion or decision might the board make based on that data? Those three are really important, and the format is kind of critical. We were in an XG session with one district. Administration put up a slide that had 64 pieces of information on it. And it was just numbers, and it was typical display of data,
Totally.
student achievement data. And literally, the helicopter pilot on the board says, what are the 3 things up there I'm supposed to pay attention to?
Yeah.
Right? So how, and this is a frequent mistake, no offense, folks in the profession, where you're steeped in it, and your staff is steeped in it, and they're used to presenting to administrators, and they're presenting to the board, and they're shaking, because they're presenting to the board, it's a big deal. And yeah, you don't know why, Ty, but they do, right? And like it's, so, but what is it that the board's supposed to know out of that data?
One thing I
What
did
does it
tell,
say?
one thing I said to Dr. Golden one time was, they take a bunch of regular people like us who are from all walks of life. I mean, I'm in the floor business. I was a teacher at one time. And they put it, and we get elected. I ran, I won an election, won by 9 votes.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
they
beat you.
So they put us in this role that's full of acronyms, that's full of PhDs, full of people that are experts in something that, okay, yeah, we all went to school, but that doesn't mean we're an expert on school.
And it's got its own
It's taken 4.5 years, seriously, to really feel
Yes.
comfortable in listening and being able to have intelligent conversations about these things with all these PhD and smart people, because I'm representing my people that are worried about things that are going on in our district. So it is an interesting relationship and concept. And you've heard this many times, the fire hose, drinking out of the fire hose, 100% accurate.
Well, and I just threw out Old May a few minutes ago and I realized probably all of you know that I mean Open Meetings Act, but the public doesn't know that I just meant Open Meetings Act, but, you say it every day, it's shorthand, and it's like, but,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned coming into this is it's not just the numbers, it's not just the improvement of
Right.
compared to this school, compared to this school, who's doing the best, or who's doing the work. It's not that to me anymore. A lot of it has to do with growth. And so when you see a school that's struggled for so long jump up, even though they're still not at the top, that's to be celebrated.
Right.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's massive for them because they've never been able to celebrate growing like that before. So something's going on. There is a seed that's been planted that's flourishing, and that makes me happy. Something's going right.
And the individual students' growth,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what it's about, right? It's did they grow at least a year this year?
One of the things that's standing out to me, and what data does the board need to see, what format, what decision does the board need to make with that data, to be able to say, and I'll use our House Bill 3 goals as an example in all of this, that's one of those things that we can space out information throughout the year on. And there are certain times when those assessments are out, we don't need to wait until an annual report on that, which we did. So that's a good catch for us right there, because to your point, if you give somebody 64 things to look at, natural person is gonna say, what am I supposed to look at?
Well, and having your staff too sort of drop back into their basic teaching mode and checking with the board for understanding. And having a, you know, not having a for information only report,
Right.
but a for conversation report.
Yeah.
Like how does the board talk about this data? Their sense making.
Yeah.
I think the simpler you can keep the data
Yes.
for board people, the better off it is. And I think it's really hard, no offense, Aaron, your first couple of years on the board, I know mine, I know I sat through at least half of the meetings and, you know, I don't speak Latin. I'm pretty sure that's what they were talking about. I just raised my hand when I was, but I want her, I said, you're gonna hear stuff, you're like, what are you talking about, BD, local, and why are y'all making all this? But yeah, even the data, I think that sometimes the data, because it makes so much sense to them,
Right.
the simpler that we can, if Ty and I can just look up and be like, oh yeah, we're doing good there.
It's the
That's,
day job, right?
yes.
I didn't know what ADSC was. And I wasn't gonna raise my hand then.
Right.
I was like, who wants to ask?
But I do think, though, that that's where,
But that's what we do.
we do. But I also think that the state mandated training that we get, though, is necessary to be comfortable with a lot of the concepts that we're thrown into. You know, SLI and some of those things. I do feel like I've gained some things important from that, because we have to have that ongoing training, and it's required, you know, by the state for us to have those things. But we need, you know, we need that, and we need that foundation to keep growing. But yeah, and I think sometimes too, they'll send us our packets, and we'll go in, I dive into my packet and read the heck out of that thing. And sometimes I'll read a couple of those things over and over again. And then we get to our meeting that Monday night, and we get presented the same exact thing that we just studied all weekend.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes there's a little redundancy there,
Yeah.
where we should be relied on to be able to understand the concepts. But I think, though, that the school board meeting, to me, when we get to our presentations by our admin, that is an ability for them to celebrate the programs that they're working on to the public.
Right.
And then if we do have a question that we've heard from our constituents, we need to ask those questions. But sometimes I do feel like there's a little bit of redundancy in the process.
Some thoughtful questions help the administrators know that you're engaged in the
Yes.
content. So if Chris speaks up and says, well, how are the third grade girls doing compared to how the third grade boys are doing?
And he will.
Right? Then all of a sudden, folks become alive because you start to get engaged.
Right.
It's good.
But I appreciate the time, because you can see when they come up there, they're ready to go. I mean, they've got their papers ready, they've been working all week getting that presentation, and it's a chance for them to highlight their hard work and what they're accomplishing for our kids.
They do good work.
That's why that's so important to me.
I do get that feeling sometimes as well, right, where you're like, hey, I've already, you know,
I read the report already.
But there are plenty of times, though, where even though I've studied that data, you go into the meeting, and the point of view coming from the administrator is something completely different than what I took out of it when I was studying on my own, right? So I still do very much value going over some of that, because I think it wasn't obvious to me. And maybe that goes back to your 3 points, right, about how you present the data, right? And I do this on a weekly basis. I mean, I prove a 60-page status report we got to give to the government, you know, on a weekly basis, and lots of it's full of 3-axis charts and data bars and everything. And what I put on there is 3 or 4 bullet points. Okay, here's why you care. Here's why you care about what's on here. Here's the 3 takeaways, right? And so maybe on that chart, if it was here's the 3 bullets we want you to know, right, that maybe helps with
And
that
not just
situation.
the whole thing again.
Yeah.
Well, some consistency or regularity, like if the administrators know, here's some questions the board's going to have. And I know Matt would try to prep them in advance, but as you're more just thinking more about the data and what you really want to know and how it fits with the plan, how it moves students toward the journey, then, you know, getting engaged in those conversations, it's really encouraging to administrators to see that their work's mattering.
And then think about your role. If your role is to ensure accountability and also inform the public, when you look at data, you want to know what's going well, what's praiseworthy, so when you go out, you're advocating. Here's how we're doing on our, everyone might not come to a board meeting, they might not watch the broadcast, but if you are equipped and you're conversing, you can share it. So what's going well, what we're working on, what needs improvement.
when we get those reports, when I'm reading those things, well, just a packet, you know, I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, what's the issue here? Sometimes I really don't know what the issue is. I've just got all this, I got 50, 60, 100 pages of stuff, and I'm going, what's the issue? Well, what do you want me to do? You know, tell me what the issue is, and then I can look at the data, okay? But just don't give me a lot of information, because some of that stuff I really don't even know what it means. I told Jennifer Lamb that before too. You know, back 6, 8 months ago. I mean, she's very, very good at what she does. I mean, she's an expert. And
It's our CFO.
yeah, and I told her, I said, Jennifer, you're not gonna insult me by telling me what that means. I mean, tell me what it means. I mean, tell me what this is showing you. Okay. If you give me this chart, you're gonna say, okay, does that mean I'm in good shape or in bad shape?
That's what I need to know.
If I'm in bad shape, then I know that maybe we need to make a decision about something. But if we're in good shape, great. Okay, that's good. But that's what I want to know. We need to get down to the basics, to the fundamentals, because this is what he does every day. Right. To do that.
You know, Manuel brings out probably one of the things that is really the toughest thing for board members is school finance.
Yeah.
We've been talking about all this other stuff today, goal setting, the curriculum, facilities, all these things. There's this big, huge, gorilla sitting over there in the corner, and it's school finance.
And some of us love school finance.
It is, and hey, after doing this for a while, I mean, I get it. It's not gettable. It is so confusing. Yeah, gold, copper, silver, all these things.
Yes.
All of this stuff. And your area is growing like crazy, and your property values are going, and you're paying the price. Guess what? The state cuts your legs out from under you. You get less from the state. People don't understand that.
How could this be?
Hey, we've lowered the tax rate 2 years in a row, but all the papers want to say is we're raising taxes because property values are going up. People don't get that. And it is very confusing. And our CFO and this guy right here, they get it, and it takes a while for us to get it because school finance is made confusing, in my opinion, on purpose by those folks down there. It's just not. Did they turn the camera off when I said that? I think it's done on purpose. It doesn't have to be that hard.
What time do y'all need to end? How much longer do we have? Should we take a break or not?
Well, we should be
We're
done by
close
the
enough to
end.
the end to finish, right?
15 more minutes, right?
He said 8:20.
8:20?
Really?
What about home run derby?
Okay. 10 minutes, fine. I mean, we've getting our hours, so we're good.
Let's do a quick run-up. I don't want to lose all this important things we talked about. When the board thinks about monitoring progress towards this vision, breaking it down into bite-sized chunks, so this year, focusing on this year now, the standards tend to matter more. Matt and his team can look at some suggested recommended progress measures. These determine the health of our system. You get a pretty good idea of how we're doing based on these progress measures. You all offer feedback and input, agree on those. But then the important thing would be when you look at data and they present data, the board sounds like you want to know what's important. What do I need to know? In my job to offer informed oversight, to hold us accountable, to say, Matt, crank it up or dial it back, whatever the case is. I need to know what these data mean, right? I need to know where we're striving for improvement, right? Or here's how I know we're making progress. Other quick thoughts that you want to think about thematically to let Matt and his team know ways to help you do your job better, practicing informed oversight.
This may or may not be to what you're asking, but I know that providing data is really overwhelming because for what a kindergartner is doing is different from a second grader versus a seventh grader. I mean, it's the data. So I'm just even wondering, and you mentioned about the board, the weekly board bulletin. If we highlight certain age groups that, and I know it at certain times because kindergarten may not be testing their TPRI or FNP until this part of the month, and it would allow central office to, okay, we don't have to present K through 12, we're going to focus on elementary, or we're going to focus on 6, 7, and 8, or maybe even just breaking down the data at certain times.
There's a natural rhythm.
And so then, just by Christmas, we will have been able to see,
This is where we're starting.
Yes.
And being sure to shine a light where there there's areas for celebrating successes or areas
Yes,
for
for
concern.
sure.
Here's some areas where we
Don't
need
embrace
more.
it.
So that they're not having to gather it all, hurry, and as a previous elementary teacher, sometimes you feel like you have to test more
Mm.
than you do, you get to teach. And so right when you get to teach, then
And
it's
you
like,
wanna fix
oh gosh, now we've got to go through another round of F&P testing. Oh, now it's TPRI testing, now it's, whatever the, so, I just thought that.
And how they turn assessments into actually learning opportunities.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental.
Well, and something that we did this year that I would love to see at K through 5 is the standardized grading versus just good old 0 to 100, because how is it that my third grade son is making A's and B's, but he's not passed a single district benchmark all year? That doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so, but like in first grader, my first grader, I knew exactly where she was, because it was great, she was graded on those certain standards in that certain time frame. And so it wasn't a 0 to 100. And so.
Progress toward meeting that
Yes,
standard.
yes.
Yeah, but that was a great, and that
Yes.
came from, I'm assuming from you and Deanna and stuff, because I dealt with the same thing. You got a fifth grader who's straight A's, and then they take a benchmark, and you're looking at them like, what did you do that day? Did you even show up for the test?
Yeah.
Well, had you known going along that, yeah, they got an A, but they're really struggling with these things right
And
here.
sometimes the grades that are taken can sometimes be a little bit more subjective,
Sure.
Um,
Fun activities.
But that's also where you've got to let teachers kind of have some of the reign too.
Now, I
Um,
could jump
as
on that
well as-
point from a person who's got 2 kids in college right now, who were both good students. How can I say this? I'd like to see us focus a little bit more or less on the grades, because when they get to college, they get evaluated differently than what we're doing in high school. They don't get to redo, retake, do again, things like that. And so those kids that are on that path, I think we've dropped the ball a little bit on a group of kids. Like Manuel said, we've concentrated on these kids, and we've got to concentrate on these kids. But it's these in the middle, I think sometimes, that when they get off to school, they're like, well, I used to get to redo my deal. I used to use my notes for my tests. They wouldn't let me take a 0. I couldn't fail. Well, guess what? You're in college, we got your dad's money, and we don't care.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a really good point, because there's a difference between learning and a grade. And unfortunately, that's what we've lived out sometimes, is it becomes about, did I get past that grade that I need to get, rather than did I learn the material that I really need to learn? And we have to figure that one out better.
That's tough.
I do want to say one thing real quick, if I could. These key progress measures and what Orrin was talking about earlier, why this is so important to us. I'll tell you the struggle that I have as a superintendent. It goes back to Ty and Janet have both talked to me about this at different times, about the board presentations, and here's a packet of information, and then we get an administrator up in front to explain that. And sometimes it is redundant. But one of the things that I worry about the most is having an uninformed board and me making assumptions that everybody's got everything. And so that's the struggle that I have. So when we nail down those key progress measures and maybe how data needs to look or how it needs to be presented to y'all, that will help me and our administrative team out too, because one of the fears that I have is I don't want to go back to just expecting our board to be able to say, no, we got it, it's all good, you don't need to talk to us about it, because there's some really key nuances in some of that information. So when we get to these progress measures and adopt these this year, if you would just keep that in mind too. We don't want to take for granted that we have such a good working relationship. We want you to be able to ask those questions and give you the right info too.
And that's what I've appreciated about how y'all reframed the workshop.
Yeah.
And I know y'all are dragging us through this process, but when we moved it to the big red room the last couple of times, I think it's been closer, like you said, it's closer to what you envisioned.
Yeah.
That's when we really get to dig deep into the nuts and bolts.
Right.
So I think that's where that happens.
That's right.
And I like how you've reframed that part of our meetings.
And just so y'all know, in our board planning piece, one of the things that's the hardest for us is, I think it's because of COVID, and I think it's because it's in the PFAC and the Pittenger there. That setup is just not conducive to a collaborative discussion. When you have one person standing at a podium presenting information to you and you were sitting in the dais looking at them, right? That's just not the same as this dialogue that we have here
It's
today.
like a congressional hearing.
Yeah. Well, I think something that Manuel said, on the data I wrote it down, but it was, and then putting it maybe in the weekly notes on something, but what he hit on, it would be, the basics of what I think we need to know with that kind of stuff is, what is it that you're showing me? Why are you showing it to me?
Yes.
What does it mean to me?
Yes.
Yeah, what I mean, and
That's
because if you tell me that, then I could probably get through it.
The why you're showing me and what you want me to take away is.
Yeah.
Yeah, narrow the issue down, narrow it down.
Yeah.
I mean, longer is not always better.
Pie chart.
Yeah. Why is it important?
To answer the, sorry.
No, you're fine.
To answer the question, what are the KPIs? Well, look at the campus improvement plan, look at the district improvement plan, and it better be something we're tracking in there.
Needs to all align.
Right, it needs to all be aligned, right? So that's the source of what we should be looking at. If we can boil those down or summarize some of those or whatever, right? In my mind, that's how we should be looking at it. Let's not invent something that we're not already tracking, right? Like if it's that important, let's find a way to track it.
You put it in the right format for you to be able to.
Yeah, and then we've talked about this maybe at least once or twice, but some of this stuff is squishy, right? So training with graduates awesome, but some of this is really squishy,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And so is there some kind of format of an annual report type thing, right? So from the corporate world, right? Is there some kind of management discussion that goes along, and maybe it's at a campus level, or maybe it's at a district level. Like, is there, how do we tell that we're making progress? What is the story that we tell around this that we can then take out and share? How do we make that visible, right? It seems like a good format to do it.
Maybe easier to put it at the campus level, because like you said, across our district, different campuses are gonna have different issues and different hotspots and different things. Like, I know the school you're talking about, because they're making progress, and we're so happy. So maybe it would be cool to highlight that maybe from a campus standpoint to see. That would also help us evaluate our leaders on our campuses, maybe with the culture stuff that we worry about so much on those campuses. Maybe be able to track that a little bit better if we did see the data on a campus level with grades, grade levels as well.
Yeah, the campus discussion is really important, because like when I went out with Matt, I mean, we all did, right, to some of the campuses to get tours.
I love those.
One of the questions that I asked each principal was, hey, look, like when I'm out and about, like, what do you want me to say about your campus? Like, what about your campus specifically? Like, tell me your story for right here. Like, how do I help tell your story? Yeah.
We've been toying with the idea, for lack of a better term right now, I'll use what they use often as community-based accountability, and I talked to y'all about that about a year and a half ago, but the idea that every year we as a district say, here are the goals that we set, here are the things that matter most to us, community, this is how we're doing on it. And we just have an open, honest discussion, but then getting to the campus level of that, the only thing I can equate that to is we're doing mid-year, we call them academic conferences this last year with the principal and myself and our team to be able to say, here's what we said we were going to do, are we on the right track to do it on each campus? But I haven't thought about more level than that. So.
That's that annual report idea, is community-based accountability, but yeah, you can see how on each aspect of the journey of a graduate, where schools are telling their story on whether it's empathy or critical thinking or perseverance. This is what we've done to improve our perseverance, persistence. More students are completing tasks. Something you can make it quantitative.
Absolutely.
What percentage of students completing a task, finishing a program? That's good. And that's the area that really high-performing students sometimes suffer the most in, is perseverance. We see that. Students getting out of high school, they were top of the class, but they go into college and they just get lost in the crowd.
But I think we do have to be careful, though. I don't want to put any more on our campuses. I do want campus reports. I think it's important. But these teachers, these principals, they're already stretched thin. And there's a balance. There's always a balance, right? There's a balance in the data they give us, but there's also a balance in we start demanding so much that Matt has to fill positions with people who aren't doing anything all day, but just
trying to get us data. So I think we just have to find that balance in there, that, because their role is to educate the kids, not to report to us.
Yeah. And I 100% agree with that too, being married to a teacher, I
Yeah.
know. Yes, so are you, yeah, and I didn't mean to increase y'all's work level or theirs, but the refining of things.
Yeah.
What I see in Matt's notes and in his heart and comments is him wanting to figure out, okay, what does the board need and want? How do we do that? And that's where you're at. I mean, it's amazing that you all got through this year like you did. There are a lot of people that started at a new superintendency the month or two that Matt did, and they are no longer in the business, and they will never be back.
We called him every week and we said, you're still here.
You're still
right?"
there.
Okay, right? And I must say, in fact, I'm the only one in the building right now.
You're not going anywhere.
But seriously, I mean, what you've got going here is potentially really powerful, so how do you sustain it? How do you keep going, being mindful, you're not wanting to put more work on, but you're wanting the work to be meaningful to him and to you. And I just want to circle back, we sort of touched on this at the beginning, but yeah, you hired him. And so that idea, you know, his success is your success, but ultimately your success is also tied to his success, you know, very mutually interdependent, if there was ever an example of that. You need him to be successful. He needs you to be successful. So how does he make sure you have sufficient information, the right information, so it's not just a pile of stuff, but the right information that you can make a decision on. And ultimately, if these are your new guiding documents, how will the board make sure we're making progress on these documents? What is that? It's an ongoing conversation. Certainly want to commend you for your time here tonight and your investment in this. And draw back to the governance board just slightly. You know, one of the things that they put in that book is that connection between governance and the coherence with the administration and teaching and learning in the classroom, and that it all needs to be working together. They highlight some things that we've found elsewhere as really important, the community leadership and engagement that the board has, but also just the overall look at that word coherence, the overall that the board's a part of the system, and that you're all sort of pulling the same direction, working toward the same ends, but fulfilling different roles. Probably my best analogy out of that book is they talk about being in a helicopter and watching over a fire, and there's people like Aaron that in education world could be down on the ground putting out the fire, but somebody needs to be up in the helicopter making sure resources are allocated and aligned where they need to be. I just love the way they parse out that difference between, you know, governance is up here seeing the whole thing and making sure people have what they need, supplies are being dropped off, et cetera.
One of the things that's so unique about this board is that each of us do have very specific gifts, and we come from different backgrounds that have uniquely gifted us on the school board to see things from a different angle. It's one of the reasons I think that make us a strong board, and we use that, and we honor each other's gifts because we rely on different people's skills to be able to make us stronger.
I'll go back to some things from the very beginning, and I know Oren's got a couple of things too, but somebody mentioned, you know, just time together and some ideas, just ideas, right? Not saying that you need to do any of it. You could have breakfast once a month, the local cafe, announce it as a public meeting, public's welcome to come. You're not there to do any business other than to just catch up. How are you doing? How are your kids doing? How about that game last week or whatever? It's really just catch up. It's about the relationship. Boards can gather socially like that for the opportunities of just building relationship. Again, you post it publicly, welcome, probably be building, but it's an opportunity for that building. So that was one
Just
thing.
for the record, I don't have time for breakfast. I'm generally very busy.
Could be
Come
lunch.
to me and via Zoom. I'm happy to attend.
Could be dinner, could be
Could be
coffee.
dinner, okay.
You can also
That's
get
not
together,
nice
you
too.
know, as twos or threes and have a conversation where you're not solving the world's problem, but you just get to know each other. And and dealing with stuff that normally happens as people go through life together. Thinking too about just sort of leaving you with that question of, based on some conversations tonight, your self-assessment, your future work, what may the board want to do differently than what it's been doing for the board to step to that next level? Obviously, you know, look around. You're a good board, right? You're not in the papers. If I do a Google search for school boards gone wild, you guys don't show up, and that's a good thing, right? So, what would it be? What do you all need to do to kind of inspire that type of continuous improvement and model the growth that you want to see happen throughout the system? What would take this board to the next level?
I think at a very basic level, trust. We have to trust that we hired the right guy for the job. We have to trust ourselves to understand that we don't need to micromanage, and I'm not saying that we do that, but we have to move ourselves out of the way. We can't get involved on a campus level. We get Ty said people address him all the time about different things that go on in this community.
Right.
That's great. You give it to the superintendent, what he does with it, he does with it. But we can't take a personal ownership of everything that happens within the district because we'll get in the way. You know, I get talked to a lot about race because being an African-American female on this board, then I am the black representative. Just said, no, I didn't know I was black, so I came on board. I getting invited to the black parties and stuff. But now that I know that I'm black and that people want to talk to me, it's, you know, empowering to know that at the end of the day, there's nothing I personally as a black woman can do on this board, but what I can do is support our team and our team's decisions to ensure that our superintendent is supported. This team A is doing great work by doing that. Just at a very basic level, just trust.
You know, I have some, I don't know if these are closing thoughts, but just listening to everything.
Closing arguments?
You know, one of the things that always concerns me is that we should never overstep our bounds. We need to know what our role is, right? Our role is not personnel director or chief financial officer. The law makes it very specific as to what our role is. We do have a duty to promulgate goals. We have to set goals, right? But it's his responsibility to carry them out. Right? So I agree with Jeff. I don't want to throw a bunch of brick on anybody. All right. So I don't want to overcomplicate this. But at the same time, I don't want to oversimplify things. So Jeff's right. There is a balance, and I think we need to maintain that balance, and we need to keep within our lanes, because if we don't, I mean, the board, what we do has to mean something, right? And we govern, but we govern through our goals. That's how we do that.
Goals, policy.
Policy, that's right. Budget, yeah.
I think the respect word that Suzanne brought out is something that we've been able to maintain on this board amongst ourselves. Mutual respect and admiration. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I want to call or email you, but I want to respect your privacy and your personal life and being a dad and being a husband and those things. So I've worked really, really hard on knowing when it's appropriate to bring the concerns that I have, that I bring from the community to you and your team. And something else that I've really appreciated is you allow us to call your team. Now they let you know, which is fine, but you took that. We weren't ever allowed to do that. I appreciate that we can pick up the phone and call teaching and learning, or we can call HR, or we can call Mike Morgan or Jennifer. Jennifer and I have had several conversations on school finance because I want to know. I want that remedial class. I want to know. But I've appreciated those things that you've brought. I can't even begin to tell you guys what a different place we're in than we were 18 months ago.
We're in that picture.
I can't even begin to tell you, and the direction that we're heading. But I think what can we do to take it to the next level? I think a level of maintenance right now to gain some consistency, because we don't know what that still is yet with the new thing going. So I'd like to see us. to get to that next level, we gotta make sure we know what level we're on, and we're still working on that.
I think it's also key to remember that, we've done a lot of talking about things that happened in the past and things that weren't working well, but the things that did work well are still in place. The foundation for Belton is great.
Amen.
We're just tweaking it and making it better. Every board that here today, that will be here tomorrow and in the future, they're just gonna make it better. And so I envision in the future, there'll be another board sitting right here saying, well, the other board. But we just need to keep reminding ourselves that our foundation here in the ISD is strong. There's no leaky holes. There's no gaping problems. We're tweaking it, and we're going from that good to great and beyond, to amazing.
Yeah. I mean, we've done a lot of work this year to set up vision, journey, and, strategic plan, whatever, right? So how do we get from good to, greater, amazing, whatever, right? Is to follow through on that, right? Is to follow through on the measurement, to follow through on the refinement, to follow through on stretching and all your faster acronyms, right? Like, we've got to follow through on all of that and continue to do that in all of the new initiatives that we take on, right? Like, we've got to do that consistently. I don't know if we just say consistency, but, yeah.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I don't know if, you get on a regular routine of reporting out on the journey of the graduate or other, your focus areas and your board agendas and the conversations are all around that. You start to feel that synergy that comes from the alignment. That was a new word in the framework, by the way, last year. If you missed it at the end. Synergy? It's like synergy and teamwork or something like that, or team synergy. It all had to have two words in the top.
I think that getting into a regular cadence of reporting out on the journey of the graduate, especially in the beginning, will be important. Once we establish it, we feel it, we know what to expect, or we have a benchmark to move forward from, I think that would be key, just having that report, especially since this is something brand new.
In the team building rule, you're supposed to identify something you would like to learn more about this year and something you would like to see the team learn about more this year. So I know Aaron's already done that all exhaustively. Whether you or someone else, what are some things, one or two things, just as a group, what's something you would like to learn more about or you would like for the team to learn more about? And I know Matt's got some ideas too.
I want to make sure that we are keeping the district focus on each and every, and I don't know what that looks like, but we say it feels good, it sounds good. I just want to know, I want to see it. I want the data. How can we see that? How can we, as we're talking to constituents, how can we say, well, look at this. This is how I know we're doing well in this particular area.
And going off of that, I want to hear from students. I want to hear students say they feel valued.
And parents.
No matter which one you ask, I want them to say, I enjoyed going to Belton
And
ISD.
tell you why.
Yeah.
Right.
Almost like create another, not like a big red heart award, but something where students and parents can sign up to share their each and every experience kind of thing.
I like it.
How that would look like, or how it would be presented, or maybe at board meetings, or that may be too far in between, It might not be enough.
The local PTAs do a great job, maybe at a campus level, PTAs can help send that message.
Anything else you as an individual or the board as a whole would like to learn more about this year?
If we look at our assessment, the one area with all the black was around sort of the HR personnel, like just how it works, not doing it.
Right.
But policies
right.
around that.
Right.
Informed oversight, is that the term you were using, there were some key things, I just went through and looked, and there were a few policy things that came up in that assessment, and a few operations, HR type things, and I think we can figure out how to dive deeper in, and I think that notion of informed oversight is super important. It's not that you do the work of our HR department, but you know the process that they're using to do the work, and you feel comfortable with that.
And if a community manager complains about something, you actually have an answer sometimes.
Yeah.
You can't always have an answer, but sometimes, we actually have a policy and we've been following that.
Right.
It's how can we be more proactive instead of reactive?
Yes.
I know, like, again, being new, there's so many policies that I'm hearing, I'm like, oh, I need to go back and read that, I don't No, you know, because there's no way for me, or I'm sure even some of y'all that have been on longer,
Right,
that you know
yes.
them all, but, you know, how do we stay ahead? I mean, kind of like with my son Casey, who has special needs. I'm constantly going to the doctor so that we don't end up in the hospital.
Yeah.
And we're constantly just staying ahead so that we don't get behind, because there were years where we never got ahead. So,
Don't laugh at me, Manuel, for saying this, but EIC local, I want to know this top to bottom, side to side, because I think this is a big moment in our district's foundation for the future. Because I really think that our educational, the after high school has changed a lot, and the job market's changed a lot. So I think EIC local is going to be a big deal, and I don't understand it as much as I would like.
The EIC logo is huge.
Yes.
Okay.
Enjoy this time.
Do I get to talk or I have to be quiet?
You know our meetings are twice as long as yours already.
That's y'all's fault.
I can't blame you.
Who got all green? Who got all green?
I know, Warren, you have a closing word you want to?
Well, I was gonna circle back to what Suzanne mentioned, but Chris already covered it. Don't miss the opportunity to go back over that assessment and fill in those spots that are black. There is no one specific intention for that. You do it your own way. Make it a point to learn how you do what they're asking. If you have any questions, ask Phil or me, and we're just gonna tell you more about what that question means. But yeah, don't miss the opportunity. The governance core talks about one of the key parts of good governance is committing to good governance. So this is your commitment to good governance. You took an assessment, it's evidence-based. Don't just drop it, go back and look at kind of where those black marks are and find out where the shared learning and understanding can occur there.
I had two notes here from the governance core. They just happen to be on this folder that I brought with papers. But they were systems thinking, and basically the guys, the two authors there, saying this is where boards tend to fall short, is not realizing everything is a system, right? And that it all, one piece impacts the next piece. But then they talk a lot about strategic action. So not doing 50 different things, but doing 1, 2, 3 things really well. That's one of those that's been associated with boards that are really high achieving boards, is they do a few things really well. They just kind of nail it. We found in the Lighthouse study, boards that learn together as a team, they tend to be governing systems that are improving and achieving. And I think that goes back to systems theory. Like if the people at the top are learning, it's a whole lot better chance that everybody throughout the system is learning. So think about that. How you model your learning. If you go to a convention this fall, and when you come back your next board meeting, talk at the board meeting about what you learned, why it's important, how it makes a difference. Modeling that kind of learning and the reflection. I know I was sort of getting at Erin a little bit after the break, so I'll be curious to talk to her a year from now. How is she thinking about, what was this I got onto, the school board, being a teacher and then being on the other side of the dais, and how different that is. But maybe even thinking and talking in meetings about that. I used to think we should really do this, but I've learned we actually need to do that. Models that, again, for students, families, staff.
And it goes back to the values on a continuous improvement that we adopted this, as it's so important for our whole system. And that, again, if we model that as a team of 8, saying, here's how we're improving, here's what we're learning. It's a good idea.
Enough of us, right?
I do want to say, it's, we get to choose the direction of this kind of training, and we get to choose who comes and helps us and facilitates us, and you guys have done a great job. This has been really good conversation, and some of the best I think we've had.
Oh, I think the XG thing, although some of the questions I didn't like the way they're framed, we've never done that.
Yeah, I like this.
I mean, I didn't, when I got into it and I started taking it, I was like, we've. I was like, man, I wonder if I was supposed to do this in the past. I didn't do it. But that was really eye-opening to sit there and then to get the data back. And not being mean, when I looked at it, I see, I don't know, I was like, ooh, Erin's being honest. Because I had no idea what that was asking her.
But also being able to sit down and discuss it and put our local flair on each concept, to me, that's the key. we gotta make it Belton, or it's just not gonna work.
Yeah, totally agree.
Is there anything else?
Not from us, unless you have
Do you want to give a speech, man?
No, well, you know, I am a little tempted. We should have put superintendent's report on here, because I like that.
It looked like he was gonna discuss.
All right, with that then, I will, this meeting's adjourned.